Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto fights back against the council part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The day was October the 10th, and the time was evening. Uzumaki Naruto ran through the streets of Konohagakure, which were unusually empty. The feast and festival celebrating the Yondaime Hokage's defeat of the nine-tailed fox had just ended, and only a few people were yet filtering out of the great square. Naruto had not attended the feast, because none of the merchants with their booths would give him any food. He had eaten earlier, and now just ran, getting to know the village better and better. The lack of glares and quiet curses was also an advantage. The sort of people who left the feast early were usually in a hurry, and few of them would take time out of their busy schedules just to make life unpleasant for the village pariah. Today had been a good day, reflected Naruto. It was his birthday, and as always the old man had shown up at his apartment to tell him happy birthday and to give him a present. This year, in honor of his entering the ninja academy, he had given him a very nice kunai with his name engraved on the handle, below the wrappings, which Naruto had immediately taken to the academy throwing range to practice with. It felt better in the hand than the academy kunai, even the ones he got when Irika-sensei handed them out, and while he was still unable to reliably hit anything with it, he hoped to become better quickly. It was definitely a requirement that a Hokage be able to hit things with kunai. Akiyama Yuma and Sakura Hachiro were both battle-blooded Chunin of Konoha. Unfortunately, they had both also had rather too much to drink during the fourth festival, and Yuma had lost a brother, and Hachiro his father to the Kyuubi. So when the demon brat ran full tilt into Yuma and fell on his butt, either were inclined to forgive him. "Hey Yuma-san, look who it is," said Hachiro in a menacing, but slightly slurred voice. "It's that kid," replied Yuma, his emphasis unpromising. That kid had just gotten up and was in the process of dusting himself off, when looking up he saw the two shinobi looking at him menacingly. "Oh. Sorry, Ninja-san," he said, looking quickly between the two. "Sorry, he said Yuma. I wonder if he's really sorry, Hachiro-san?" Hachiro seemed to cut himself off. "Brat. I bet he's not. Let's see." Yuma leaned close to Naruto. "Are you?" Naruto jumped backwards, waving his hands in front of him. I am. Sorry." He attempted to dodge around Yuma and continue on his way, but the Chunin's extended arm halted him. "I have to go, Ninja-san," he said, a minor note of fear entering his voice. Yuma pushed a bit of killing intent at the boy, expecting an immediate reaction. Seeing none, he increased the level until he was almost sweating, and was finally rewarded with a flinch. "You're going nowhere, brat," he said in a low voice. "You see, I think there's a good bit of Konoha who wouldn't be too sad to see you dead. And you just ran into me. I think I'm going to call that assault." Hachiro, who had moved around behind Naruto, spoke from directly behind his ear. "You kill him now, it'll be self-defense, won't it, Yuma-san?" "I reckon it will, Hachiro-san." Yuma picked Naruto up by the front of his orange jumpsuit. He flailed his limbs about, but to no effect. No one seemed to object to this treatment. If anyone nearby would have stirred themselves to save the demon brat, none of them were ninja powerful enough to take on the two Chunin. He moved into a small alley between the buildings, Hachiro following him. The beating was quick and brutal. Yuma punched Naruto in the face hard, while still holding him, then slammed him into the alley wall and hit him again. Naruto was still struggling, but without any real purpose. The academy training had gone out of his head with the first blow, and even if it hadn't, nothing in the academy taijutsu prepared him for being lifted off the ground one-handed. A flailing kick, without any intent behind it, went towards Yuma's groin. He easily blocked it on one leg, and grinned nastily. "There's another count of assault there. What do you think?" Hachiro was standing between Naruto and Yuma and the alley entrance, facing them. "So it seems, Yuma-san," he said. Yuma shifted his grip, gaining a better purchase on the jumpsuit, and hit Naruto knife-handed in the collarbone. It snapped with an audible report, and Naruto screamed. Then Yuma dropped him. His legs folded, and he fell to the ground, shifting the ends of bone against each other, and dragging out another scream. Naruto's shoulder was on fire, and hot pokers were being inserted into it with every breath. His lip had split and his nose was bleeding from the first strikes, and he curled protectively around his shoulder almost on instinct. An indistinct cry of "Die, demon!" came from above as a foot smashed into his arm, both bones breaking, and another wave of pain crashed through his mind. His right leg was next, then his left foot. Then his ribs exploded, pain dwarfing anything he had felt before, and he fell into merciful unconsciousness. Being unconscious, he did not see the figure, still in formal robes and hat from the Yondaime's festival, appear suddenly at the alley mouth. He did not see the two ninjas who had been beating him turn pale in fright and attempt to run away. He did not see them both caught before they had taken 2 steps apiece, and knocked out with frightening efficiency. The Sandaime Hokage, once called the god of shinobi, could barely rein in his rage enough to only knock the two Chunin out, rather than kill them immediately. He stared at their unconscious bodies for a moment, his hands shaking, then turned to their victim. Naruto had been knocked out a few blows ago, and each blow had broken bones. He bent over him, made as if to lift him up, but stopped after seeing the way his arm twisted, sickeningly, at the motion. Instead, his face weary, he formed a sign and 2 copies of him appeared by his sides. Without any words, they dashed away over the rooftops, one to bring a medical team with a stretcher, one to bring the ANBU and Ibiki. The original stood still in the alley, watching Naruto and the 2 Chunin. A glint of metal caught his eye, and he bent over and picked up the kunai he had given Naruto earlier that day. Putting it away, he stood again. At least Naruto would not lose that gift as soon as it was given. Naruto woke up in a bed in the hospital. He had been here several times before. He seemed to have more accidents than most children, but he had never been this badly injured before. There was no pain in, well, anywhere, when from what he remembered of what the ninja had done to him he should have been hurting all over. In fact, he should have been dead, if they continued. He couldn't imagine why they had stopped. There was no pain, but the lack of pain was more pronounced in some areas than others. His left foot was particularly not painful, and the feeling, while not painful, was unpleasant. Keeping his left leg carefully still, he tried to sit up, but there was a burst of not pain in his ribs, and he hastily lay down again. He looked around the room. His field of view was limited by the fact that he could not sit up, but he could see the upper half of a wooden door on the wall to his right, and the back of a chair in the small area of room not occupied by the bed. The walls were white, the door was unpainted. Everything was completely unremarkable except for that line on the door. It was irregular and thin, not quite as thick as the gaps between the planks of the door, but more noticeable because it broke their pattern. It traced from a point midway between the top corners of the door in a wobbly curve downwards before leaving his field of view, and another branched off it about halfway up and traced its own line to near the upper hinge. Naruto turned his head to get the door more fully in sight, trying to discern why the door had that particular pattern on it. Was it a flaw? Had paint spilled on it at some point? Then he noticed that the wall around the door bore some similar lines, though they did not continue the ones on the door. Then it seemed that they continued all over the walls and ceiling, no square meter of drywall without its wending, mysterious line. Naruto could have sworn that the walls had been blank when he first looked at them, but the lines had certainly not just appeared. The feeling was more like a realization that they had been there all along. He sat up. There was another burst of not pain in his ribs, but he ignored it. The feeling, while unpleasant, was not actually pain, and he was too consumed in the mystery of the there but not there lines to care about it. They were all over the walls, branching and rejoining seemingly at random, wending in irregular paths over the drywall. The obvious thing to do would be to examine them closely, but he could not get out of the bed, instead deciding to simply stare at them. They were entirely still and inoffensive, now that they had appeared, but they still gave him an odd feeling. After only a few seconds of closer attention, the odd feeling escalated to creepiness, and he looked away, instead at the wooden chair sitting in front of the door. The chair was not unusual. It was all wood, with no cushion or arms, only 4 legs, a plank-like seat, and the framed back. It also now had a bunch of lines on it, at least one crossing each rod of the back and an irregular grid of several on the seat. What are these? He looked next at the floor. It persisted in reassuring sameness for a moment before also manifesting lines, and again the feeling was not that the lines had appeared but that he had noticed that they were there already. With a sinking feeling, he examined the window. There were lines crossing the bar in the middle, and fainter lines on the glass itself. He looked at the table to his side, and felt a momentary, distracting flash of joy as he recognized the kunai the old man had given him sitting on it. Of course, it also had lines on it, as well as the table itself and the lamp above. He looked at the sheets, and there were thin lines running up his covered legs. He looked at his arms, and they were crisscrossed by the same lines, which had certainly not been there when last he looked. He would have guessed that the Chunin had chosen to follow up the beating with a game of Scar the Pariah, had they not obviously been the same thing as on the walls, the ceiling and the door. The not pain in his ribs had been becoming steadily more insistently not painful throughout, but he had ignored it due to first his curiosity, and second the creepiness of the situation. Now, the vaguely unpleasant not pain vanished entirely, replaced by a shipment of emphatic and severe pain. Naruto did not quite scream, but he collapsed, which caused the pain to spike momentarily, then fade. The shock took his mind off the lines, but they remained visible, taunting him with their inexplicable presence on everything he saw. Steps moved down the hallway towards his door, and it opened. A doctor came in, dressed like a hospital worker in gloves and a white apron, but wearing the hetaite of a medic knee. Doctor, apron and hetaite were, by now predictably enough, covered in thin, spidery lines. Awake, I see, said the doctor. The line crossing his lips moved normally with his words, as if it was simply painted on. The doctor walked a few steps to Naruto's bedside and moved a hand down his body, glowing with green chakra. And trying to sit up already. You would think we made the anesthetic seal unpleasant enough to keep you from doing that. You've got a couple of broken ribs, kid. Don't be putting strain on them. Naruto heard the words, but did not nod or speak. The lapse of whatever had held back the pain in his ribs had also given him wonderful new feelings of pain in his foot and other leg, and any movement would aggravate those or his ribs. The medic Nin did not seem to be offended by Naruto's lack of response. He waved a hand over Naruto's ribs, glowing again with chakra, and the pain mostly disappeared. So don't do that again. You'll do more damage. Also, you've got a visitor. I'd say wait here, but what else are you going to do? Chuckling softly at his own joke, the doctor left the room again. Naruto remained still this time, not moving even his head. Now that he was feeling the pain of his injuries, even without the ribs, he wished rather fervently that he hadn't sat up and triggered its return. He could still see the mysterious lines on the ceiling and on the lamp to the side, and even though he knew it was silly, he could have sworn they were mocking him. He resolved to ignore the lines for the moment, waiting instead for his visitor, whoever that would be. The only person who would be likely to visit him was the old man, so that was most likely. He was distracted from this train of thought when suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the wall on his left simply fall apart, crumbling in large chunks to the ground. He snapped his head over to look at the wall, and the holes in it, and large chunks of plaster on the ground vanished, the wall entirely as it was, including the impossible lines. What was that? He stared at the wall for several more moments, but nothing happened. He was just about to turn his head back when, again at the corner of his eye, he saw the ceiling, this time, break into pieces and fall, seemingly on him. This time the illusion was broken when the falling pieces failed to actually hit him, and as he turned his head again the ceiling was restored, whole as anything. Naruto gaped up at it in surprise. There had been something about that one. What was it? There. This time, it was the lamp above him to the right, and as it seemed to fall in pieces Naruto could just discern that the pieces were as if someone had cut the lamp all along the lines for which he still had no explanation. Is this some sort of messed up genjutsu or something? His train of thought was interrupted by the door opening. Naruto turned his head to see his visitor, the lamp snapping back into position as he did so. It was the old man. Naruto gave him a wide grin. Hey, Ojizen. The Hokage smiled back. Naruto did not seem to have been affected too badly mentally by the beating. Physically he was a mess, and it twisted something inside to see him so incapacitated, but those wounds would heal. Hello, Naruto. How are you feeling? Naruto's face twisted in mock complaint. It hurts. I sat up and it started hurting again. Usually things don't hurt this much. The Hokage sat down in the chair. You haven't ever been hurt this badly before. I think you've only ever had pretty simple breaks before. They crushed your foot completely, and broke 3 ribs when that man kicked you. His voice was hard, but he left out that similar wounds in another person might very well have ended their ninja career before it began. Naruto's mysterious healing factor, which could not be proven to be related to the demon fox inside him, and so which he had not mentioned to any of the many parties who would have demanded information on any sign of the QB, had done its work. The nasty wounds would take only a few days to fully heal. Why did you sit up? This was delivered in a voice less hard, and more long-sufferingly exasperated. The anesthetic seal should have warned you not to. I felt that, but I had to figure out those lines, said Naruto. Not sitting up again, he pointed with his uninjured arm at the door. Ojizen, do you know what those are? What are you pointing at? Asked the Sandaime. He turned in his chair to look at the door. Lines? You mean the joins between the planks? No, there are lines. Like just random lines on everything, said Naruto. They're all over the door, and the walls, and on that lamp, and even on my arms. And he paused, looking at the old man. On you too? And I've never seen them before. Do you know what they are? I don't see any lines anywhere, said the Hokage. A genjutsu? But why would there be? Can you describe where they are? They're all over. But there's one, he squinted at the door, that starts right in the middle of the top of the door and goes down. It's in the middle of the plank. There. He pointed as carefully as he could. The Hokage stood up and examined the door closely. There was no line that he could see. He even used a diagnostic medical jutsu, moving his hand over the door where Naruto had indicated. Nothing was on or inside the wood, except its ordinary grain. Lines. He turned around and walked to Naruto's side. I think that someone might have put a genjutsu on you to see those lines, though I can't imagine why anyone would. It seemed like it wasn't hurting him, after all, and anyone who wished Naruto harm would have done something worse than what seemed like an absurdist prank. I'm going to try to break it now. Tell me if you see anything. He raised one hand to his face in the half-tiger seal and pushed a carefully measured amount of chakra, enough to break any illusions on anyone in the room, at least. Kai! Naruto looked around the room. I still see them. What do you think they are? The Hokage sat down again, perturbed. He was confident that the boy wasn't lying. It was unlike Naruto to lie, and the only motive he could have had was, again, some kind of prank. Which, of course, was like Naruto, but his pranks usually involved fewer claims to see networks of lines on everything and more ludicrously oversized graffiti and strategically placed paint traps. And if the boy was, in fact, seeing something no one else could, and it wasn't a genjutsu, and it was an accomplished genjutsu master indeed who could create one that would resist even his first attempt at dispelling it, then it was, by simple common sense, likely to be related to the fox. But Jinchuriki were not unheard of, and while it would hardly be in the interest of any village to release detailed information on their Jinchuriki's abilities, Ibiki and Jiraiya's most excellent intelligence networks would have picked up any hint of a rumor of a dojutsu component to the powers of any Jinchuriki. Was the fox, or Minato's seal, different somehow? His train of thought was interrupted by Naruto waving his good arm at him. Hey Ojaizen, what do you think they are? You went all quiet. The Sandaime smiled at Naruto. I was just thinking. I don't know what they are, but if you see anything else that seems related to the lines, let me know. Naruto replied immediately, with his usual enthusiasm. Well, I was seeing this stuff right before you came in, where if I looked at the same thing for too long it looks like the stuff in the corner of my eye is falling apart, but then if I look at it it goes back together again. But when it falls apart it looks like it got cut along all the lines. So I thought it might be a genjutsu too, but I guess it's not, right? The Hokage frowned. Things look like they're falling apart along the lines. That's odd. I've never heard of anything like it. What does it look like? Naruto focused on the ceiling above for a moment. Then, suddenly, he flinched to his right and glanced left with a perturbed expression on his face. It looks like just all of a sudden someone came in here with a saw and cut the wall along all the lines, except really fast, and the pieces are falling to the ground and I can see the other side of the wall. But then when I look at it it goes back to where it was. Interesting. Can you tell me what you saw on the other side? Did you get a good look? Not really, but it's a room kind of like this one, and it looked like there was someone in the bed. The Hokage sat back and wondered. Presently, Naruto looked back at him. Ojaizen, how long is it going to take for this to heal? I don't want to be stuck here forever. You should notice improvement just today, if you pay attention. You can walk a little tomorrow, and be out of here by the end of the week. Thanks, Ojaizen. This was with a bright smile. Oh, and thanks for that kunai too. That's really cool. I'm going to get so I can hit the target with it every time. The Hokage smiled. Naruto's brand of enthusiasm was infectious, and a welcome counterpoint to the icy or furious political squabbles that were so many of the rest of his interactions. That's good, Naruto. But don't take it to the academy, okay? Naruto frowned. Why not? It feels so much better than the academy ones. The Hokage leaned forwards, as if imparting a secret. But Naruto, if you get really, really good with the academy kunai, how good do you think you'll be with this better one? Naruto brightened considerably at that. The Sandaime stood, stretching a little. I have to go now, Naruto. Good luck, and don't try to move from the bed unless the doctor tells you. Naruto waved enthusiastically with his uninjured arm. Bye, Ojaizen. Naruto lapsed back into the bed as the door closed. Though he would be stuck here for the rest of the day, it seemed to already be afternoon by the light coming in the window. The foot of the bed, just visible at the bottom of his field of view, seemed suddenly to crack in pieces and fall. Naruto blinked and scowled, the bed frame reappearing as he did so. Annoying, he said aloud. He closed his eyes. Luckily, the inside of his eyelids seemed to be immune to whatever had put mysterious lines on the rest of the world. It was perhaps an hour later, which Naruto spent alternately with his eyes closed or watching random pieces of his surroundings fall spontaneously to pieces, when he began to notice a gnawing hunger in his midsection. He looked around, and seeing no method of calling a doctor less conspicuously, started shouting. Hey! Someone! Do I get any food in this place? It was about a minute of this before he heard steps down the hallway again, and the door opened. It was the same medic Nin as before, but his expression was annoyed. Hey! Quiet it down a little, kid, there are other patients here. You missed lunch because you were still asleep. I'll send someone in with food. Naruto replied at a more reasonable volume. Thanks, Dr. San. Is there anything to do around here? Not other than lie around. If you get another visit, you can ask whoever it is to bring you something to read. Naruto pouted. All right, he muttered. The medic Nin raised an eyebrow at him, then, after a moment, turned for the door. If there isn't anything else? He asked, managing to make it clear that there had better not, in fact, be anything else. Naruto gulped. No, that's all, he said. Thank you, he went on hurriedly, remembering his manners. He got a nod over the shoulder, and the doctor left. As the door closed, Naruto flinched and looked up, only to see the ceiling return quickly to its non-broken state. He shivered. That could get really annoying, after a while. He lay back on the pillow again, and before he could remember to close his eyes, the table to his right broke in pieces and collapsed. He shook his head compulsively, and closed his eyes. A nurse came in with food. He opened his eyes, sitting up and trying to keep from looking at any one thing for long enough that he would see the illusions of destruction. She carried a tray with legs, which she extended and placed across his lap, harder than she needed to. A twinge shot through his ribs, and the nurse gave him a nasty look before stepping back. Naruto looked away, reminded of his apparent status in the village. As he looked out the window to avoid her eye, suddenly, deep gashes appeared across her arms, her chest, her face. She fell, blood pouring from the wounds, her arm already separate from her body. He gave a yell of horror and jerked his head around to look at her. She, of course, was still entirely intact, and glanced at him contemptuously before stepping out of the room. Naruto panted, trying to slow his heart. He knew that it had been an illusion, just another manifestation of the same thing that had been bugging him since he woke, but that had been much worse than what had happened before. The lines still weaved tauntingly and inexplicably across everything in his field of view, but he now looked at them with deep distrust. He had seen the line running diagonally down the nurse's arm, but thought little of it, ignoring it as he had begun to ignore the others, and then he had looked in the wrong place, and that line had seemed to rip her arm off. He looked at the lines on his own arms and shuddered. The tray with the food had not been disturbed by his sudden movement, so he tried to sit up to eat it, and was reprimanded by a slash of pain across his ribs. He dropped back, wincing, but the pain was less even now than it had been, and he tried again, pushing through it. He was damned if he was going to call back that nurse and ask her nicely to sit him up with pillows. She'd probably be more inclined to smother him with one. These dark thoughts accompanied him until he got himself sat up, at which point they were displaced by disgust at the quality of the food. There was a thin, stringy and tough cut of some sort of unidentifiable meat, a glass of watery milk that was pale blue around the edges, and a mound of something that might, at some point, have been a salad green, but had been tortured to the point of losing its form entirely. He looked away in disgust, and the plate split in two, dropping its unidentifiable meat and green onto the tray. Looking quickly back, he muttered under his breath and began to reluctantly eat. He was reluctant to shout again, but it was nearly another hour after he had finished, and no one had come to remove the tray. He had lain down again after finishing, and spent the rest of the time, mostly, with his eyes closed, trying to avoid the constant sensation that his surroundings were constructed from carefully arranged toothpicks and twine, and the slightest movement might break them. After sufficient impatience, he again started shouting. "Hey! Hey! Someone come and get this thing off me!" The medic Nin came in rather more quickly this time, and glared at Naruto. "What did I say about the shouting?" "Well, no one was coming to take this. And I can't quite sleep with it here." He pointed at the tray. "What?" The nurse was supposed to, well, of course she didn't. Of course. Blasted unprofessional, the medic began swearing under his breath and removed the tray. "Listen, kid, don't shout anymore. I'll be right back with something." He left the room, Naruto already having closed his eyes. He didn't want to see anyone else gutted by illusory lines. The medic returned several minutes later carrying a two-way radio set. Naruto opened his eyes as the door opened, but carefully looked straight at the medic Nin, hoping that would keep him from being a subject of Naruto's personal illusion of death. The medic left it on the table next to the Hokage's kunai. Naruto could reach it by reaching over with his good arm. "Don't bother talking, just press this button." He indicated a button on the side of the device. "That'll call me," more quietly. "Not the nurses, who apparently cannot do their job. No more shouting, okay?" "Okay." Naruto made as if to bow, forgetting his position. He flinched at the unwise motion, and hurried on. "Thank you, medic-san." The medic made for the door, Naruto keeping his eye on him. As he walked out, the chair just to his left split into pieces and fell. Naruto jumped. That hadn't been the medic, true, but it certainly hadn't been in the corner of his eye either. He closed his eyes again, hurriedly. It was not even yet dark, but Naruto, who had nothing better to do than lie still with his eyes closed anyway, decided to try to sleep. It was hard. Even with his eyes closed, he would occasionally flash back to the nurse, cut up, sliced in pieces, rendered dead and mangled by the malevolent lines. Even the knowledge that it was not real, that it had never happened, that he was being frightened by the memories of an illusion, did not make the images stop repeating. He finally slept, but his nightmares were of a grid of lines covering everything and everyone, and it all falling to pieces, everyone he knew reduced to inert piles of bloody meat, Konoha itself broken in pieces and lying on the ground. He did not scream when he woke, but it was a near thing. The room was dark, so dark that at first he could not even see the window. After his eyes adjusted, he could see it in a faint glow, probably a light down on the street. He was covered in sweat, though he had not moved from his position. An incautious decision to try resulted in a pointed twinge from his ribs and his foot. His broken arm did not pain him. He fell back into the pillow and closed his eyes again, grateful for the darkness that hid the lines of death. Naruto woke the next morning to bright sunshine. The sun shone in the window and left the room brightly lit, and the environment was cheerful enough, but he still saw the lines on the walls, the ceiling, everything, and they reminded him inescapably of his nightmare. He shuddered violently at the memory, then flinched almost instinctively, expecting pain, but even that relatively drastic motion did not draw any particular feeling from his ribs. He felt his side, where the pain had been, and felt nothing. Encouraged, he pushed a little harder, and it twinged, dashing his hopes that he might have been fully cured. He lay back again, looking up, and saw the chain holding up the lamp above him break in 5 pieces, the lamp plummeting to the ground to break the illusion. He shook his head violently and tried to sit up. The motion succeeded with no unusual pain, but a lingering sense of fragility about his side and foot warned him not to attempt any gymnastics, even if he could stand. He contented himself, for the moment, with stacking his pillows behind him and leaning back against the head of the bed. Then the door broke in pieces and fell to the ground. He shook his head violently and closed his eyes. The door had been right in the center of his field of view. Apparently whatever it was that was affecting him was progressing. The idea was not reassuring. He sat with his eyes closed, thinking of nothing in particular, until he became aware of a renewed hunger. The thought of more food like the previous days made him cringe in disgust, but his hunger eventually overcame it. Rather than shouting, he searched out the radio communicator on his bedside table. The lamp broke in pieces and fell, almost on him, and pressed the call button, before noticing that he had unconsciously moved his broken arm. A test wave called forth no pain, and Naruto grinned. This one had healed even faster than the last time he had broken a limb. The window broke and fell to the ground, its pieces shattering on impact. Naruto closed his eyes again, startled and annoyed. If nothing else, this will drive me insane in another day. The lack of a breeze, a noise or any smell of the outdoors reassured him that the window was, in fact, still intact. He remained there until the door opened and the medic Nin from the day before stepped inside. "Hello, medic-san," said Naruto, opening his eyes to look at the doctor. "I wondered if you could tell me, what time is it, and when can I get breakfast?" "You slept late, Naruto-san," said the ninja. The wooden siding tacked onto the wall in the hallway outside the door split in several pieces and fell, exposing bare plaster behind. Naruto shook his head slightly as the medic Nin continued. "It's almost noon. You'll have to wait for lunch." Naruto nodded, looking slightly chagrined. "Okay, medic-san. Ojizen said that I could get out of bed today. Can I?" The medic looked slightly aghast at Naruto's familiarity, and stepped forward to run a hand over Naruto's ribs. "Hokage-sama is probably right," he said after a moment, emphasizing the title. "You can try it now, but if it hurts you'd better get back in bed." Naruto threw off the covers only to note that he was wearing nothing but briefs. He contained his momentary startlement and slid his legs off the side of the bed, successfully standing, then asked, "Also, medic-san, is there anything for me to wear?" The medic Nin nodded. The left wall broke again, exposing another near-identical room, and handed Naruto a hospital gown that had been hanging on the wall. Naruto turned away, not out of modesty so much as a sudden dread that the illusion would catch the medic Nin, and he would be subjected to another round of blood and death. He slid into the gown, knotting it as tightly as it would knot, then spoke without turning around. "Thank you, medic-san. Do you know where my other clothes are?" "They're being taken care of. You should be able to change back into them sometime later today, if you want, but you shouldn't spend too much time out of bed. Is there anything else?" This last was spoken with a slight edge to it. Naruto guessed that the medic did not appreciate the gesture of speaking with his back turned. He turned around, reluctantly, and shook his head. The medic nodded and went out. This time it was the doorframe, tens of little wooden chunks falling to the ground around a ragged hole in the wall. Naruto quickly shut his eyes and sat on the bed. Feeling more restless now that he could stand, Naruto opened his eyes and looked around. The room was small, and only felt more confining now that he was capable of moving in it. He stood up and moved to the window, looking out. The view was impressive, and the more pleasant for the fact that he could not see any lines on anything. He was unsure whether that was due to distance, or if the odd illusions did not extend to things far from him, but it was enjoyable nonetheless. Then the question was answered for him as a tree shivered and fell to the ground, not as if it had been cut but collapsing straight downwards, a cloud forming of its leaves in the air. He shook his head compulsively, looking down, but soon looked out again. Keeping his eyes closed was getting painfully boring, and he was tired of looking at the lines. 2 more trees and a small building later, Naruto decided to stop looking out the window. He moved over to the chair and sat in it, keeping his eyes down. His eyes fell on a large, irregular piece of flooring, unobscured by the bed, defined by the eerie, spidery lines that formed its borders. Almost as soon as he saw it, it was cut along the edges and fell into the room below. Shaking his head again, he closed his eyes and moaned in frustration. The door opened. Naruto looked up and saw the medic Nin stepping through, holding a tray. This time, the tray split in two, a plate and glass falling to the ground and shattering. He shook his head convulsively, trying to clear out his mind, as the medic walked over to him with the entirely intact meal tray. He set it on the ground in front of Naruto, deploying its legs so that it made a passable table. Here you are, Naruto-san. Also, Hokage-sama, he made a point of the honorific, is here to see you again. I'll bring him up in 3 minutes. Be polite. With this admonition he again disappeared out the door. Naruto, who had looked down as soon as he saw the medic, looked up again and ate. The food was no better than it had been the night before, but he was hungry enough not to care. The door opened just as Naruto finished eating. He looked up. The doctor was holding the doorknob, and he could see the old man standing behind him. This was as far as he got before he saw the doctor slump suddenly, blood starting unexpectedly from his clothes, then collapse, his body coming apart as he fell. Without noticing the motion, Naruto was on his feet. The tray clattered to the floor as he yelled in horror, his eyes fixed on the bloody corpse lying in pieces on the threshold. Then it vanished. The doctor rushed up to him. Naruto-san. What's wrong? Naruto was hyperventilating, his mind still occupied by the image of that same doctor in pieces on the floor. What's wrong? The Hokage came up behind, pushing the doctor aside with one arm. He knelt in front of Naruto, his hands on the boy's shoulders. Naruto! Breathe! Calm! He reinforced the words with a slight genjutsu, one that would force his words to break the cycle of panic in Naruto's mind. The boy had closed his eyes immediately after screaming, and they remained closed as he calmed down. He took nearly a minute to slow his breathing to normal before he responded. Ojizen, I told you about the lines, and things breaking along the lines, and it's getting worse, and I just saw the doctor get cut up and there was blood and he fell down. Naruto's words became more and more frantic as he spoke, until the Hokage again applied the genjutsu. The next words were calmer. I keep seeing everything break, like the chair and that lamp and the wall and the floor and even a bunch of trees outside, and then there was the doctor, and the same thing happened with a nurse yesterday. The Hokage waited until his words ceased and his breathing was even before replying. It's all right, Naruto. No one is dead. I know it's hard, seeing something like that, but no one is dead. You don't need to worry about it. He was beginning to reconsider this being a genjutsu someone had laid on the boy to hurt him. It had seemed harmless enough the day before, but this was entirely different. Naruto opened his eyes, having apparently stopped panicking, but his fists were clenched and his voice was tight. Ojizen, this is getting bad. It's not so hard when there aren't people around, but I just can't look at people, I guess, because they might, like he trailed off. Naruto, it's all right. I'm going to try to find out whether it might be a genjutsu that's more subtle than I've usually seen. Can you stay here quietly until I get back? Naruto nodded, his fists still clenched. Then he sat down again, looking up, and suddenly screamed again and closed his eyes. The Hokage sighed, hating to see the boy in pain, and spoke to the medic Nin. Listen, I think this might be a genjutsu that someone's put on him. I'm going to go look into that. Try to make him comfortable, but don't stay in here unless you need to. It makes it worse for him. The medic nodded, his expression puzzled but resolute, and the Hokage walked out the door, seeking the one person in the village who was probably more skilled with genjutsu than himself. Naruto sat on the chair, his eyes closed, his head down, his hands shaking in his lap. The images of the dismembered bodies of the nurse from the day before, the medic Nin who had brought him his meals, the Hokage himself, kept running through his head. He heard the medic grab the tray from in front of him and leave the room, but the awareness was second to his near panic. He didn't know what was happening, and he couldn't leave like this. It would be torture just to walk down the street. He slumped down in the chair, keeping his eyes closed. What's happening? Why is this happening? The door opened. He looked up, opening his eyes, and suppressed the urge to slam them shut again. The Hokage entered, with someone behind him. The doorknob split from the door and fell in pieces. He forced his attention back to the newcomer. It was a woman with long black hair, wearing a Konoha Hittite, and as he looked again he noticed that her eyes were distinctly red. Kurenai-san, here he is, said the Hokage. He stood to one side, and his face was tired and sad, more so than Naruto had ever seen. This time it was his hat, showering the Hokage with strips of cloth. Naruto almost laughed. I tried a simple dispelling, but it did not react. I cannot think of anything that it could be other than a genjutsu, unless here he gave her a very significant look. She nodded and stepped forwards. Then it happened, just as it had before. The woman suddenly tensed, then slumped, then blood began to show along the lines that had adorned her body. She collapsed in a pile of blood, her limbs separating from her body, her hands and feet mangled, and then the illusion broke. He bit back a scream this time, with great difficulty, but could not hide his tensing up or the sudden look of horror that crossed his face. The woman, Kurenai, stopped, bit her lip, then stepped forward, knelt, and put one hand on his head. "Try to remain calm, Naruto-san," she said. He slowed his breathing, feeling an odd sensation that he could only describe as pins and needles of the mind. The feeling persisted for some seconds, until Kurenai removed her hand. She frowned, then stood up. "Can you point out where you see one of these lines?" Naruto pointed to the nearest line, which was on the floor. Kurenai ran a hand over the area, checking it carefully, then raised one hand in a seal and muttered "Kai." Nothing seemed to change. The line that he had just been focusing on to point out its location split, pieces of the floor falling into the room below. Turning back to Naruto, she put her hand back on his forehead and said again, "Kai." Again, there was no change. Kurenai turned to the Hokage, standing. "I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. I can't find any genjutsu here." "I don't know what to say." She looked at Naruto. Her Hittite split in 5 pieces, 2 of them falling, the others still held to her headband by the rivets. "He's obviously seeing something that hurts him, but I can't find any external influence." "Might it be?" The Hokage nodded. "It most likely is. I don't know what to do here. We need Jiraiya. He might be able to tell us if the seal was broken somehow." This time it was Kurenai again. She collapsed in blood, dying. Then, the illusion broke. Then, the Hokage. The blood was mostly concealed by his long robe of office, but it was painfully obvious that his body was split in pieces. Then the illusion broke. Naruto shot to his feet, involuntarily, clenching his eyes shut. "No!" The shout was wild and angry. Opening his eyes again, he looked around, a little wildly, seeing lines. They covered the floor, the walls, the bed, even Kurenai and the Hokage. Looking at the latter two, he flinched away, remembering the sight of their mangled bodies. His eyes fell on the table at the side of the bed, and he darted over to it, snatching up the kunai the Hokage had given him. "Damned lines!" Lifting it over his head, he slammed the point of the knife downwards into the line crossing the tabletop, expecting to embed it in the wood. Instead, it skipped and skittered along the surface, tracing the line almost unintentionally, and the table fell in 2 pieces. Naruto waited for the illusion to break, for the table to reform as it already had so many times. It did not. He shook his head wildly, clenching his eyes shut and then opening them. The table was still broken. It had split in half directly along the line he had cut. The pieces still had lines on them. None of the fragments of anything he had seen break still had any lines. Almost curiously, he ran the tip of the knife over another line, this one on the table leg. The leg broke in 2. The radio the doctor had given him lay forgotten in the fragments as he did it again, with another leg. It broke in 2. The illusion did not break. It was real. He knelt in the wreckage, almost laughing. It was too much. The nightmares were coming true. What are they? What are they? Almost beneath his notice was the Hokage's hand seal, or his spoken word. Kokwanjo no Jutsu. What was not beneath his notice was the sudden darkness that engulfed the room, sudden and absolute darkness, with no furniture, no walls, no people, no lines to torment him. He dropped to his knees in release. He felt hands on his shoulders, felt a hand gently remove the kunai from his loosened grip. Felt himself lifted up and laid on something soft. He did not care. He shouted, no longer knowing if he spoke in truth or only in his mind. "What are the lines?" A presence filled his mind, oppressive with its power. He saw red all over, even as he still perceived only the blackness of the Hokage's jutsu. A voice spoke, awful in its malice, but somehow tempered. Was that amusement? "They are death, whelp." The churning dread that had taken over Naruto's mind was submerged in a new fear, less panicky, less insane. He did not reply intentionally, but whatever filled his mind took his confusion for an answer. "The lines are death. You see with my eyes. How do you like it, whelp?" There was a heavy, gloating amusement in the words. Naruto quailed. He could still perceive the darkness around him, soothing balm after the horror before, but somehow overlaid on it was a fiery red, and he could feel the presence of an enormous power, heavy with malice. He rallied his strength to respond. "What are you?" The question brought on a roar of laughter. "You do not know? What was the blonde idiot doing? Oh, this should be very, very interesting." The laughter faded slowly, and the presence with it. Only darkness filled his vision now, and Naruto's overtaxed mind let go and slept. He woke again, and again it was daylight. It had been barely afternoon when he had freaked out the day before, so, he deduced, he must have been sleeping a long time. He was suddenly full of energy and restless, in a way that even his extreme boredom the 2 days previously had not exceeded. He bounded out of the bed, noticing that he was still wearing the hospital gown. He looked around, and saw a flash of orange on the chair. It was his clothes. He changed into them quickly and looked around. The bed was rumpled with his quick exit, and a cheerful patch of sunlight sat on the floor. It took him a moment to realize why everything looked so happy. There were no lines. It took a moment for this development to sink in, and when it did, he laughed out loud with delight. No lines. No more of everything he saw falling apart. It had not been real. He could forget about it. The table beside the bed was sitting on the ground, the top split down the middle, two of its legs sheared in half. The surfaces were eerily smooth, not split down the grain, but simply cut, perfectly, as if by a knife sharper than a hair. Okay, maybe he couldn't forget about it. Still in the wreckage of the table was the radio communicator that the doctor had given him 2 days earlier. Naruto picked it up and pressed the call button. Soon enough, there were steps down the hall and the medic Nin walked in. He looked startled to see Naruto up and dressed, but maintained a professional attitude. Hello, Naruto-san. What is it? Hey, medic-san. Do you know the time? And when can I get out of this place? It's 9 in the morning, congratulations on getting up early for once. And let's see. The medic Nin approached him. Naruto grinned at being able to maintain eye contact without fear of the man falling apart in front of his eyes. After a fairly comprehensive chakra scan, the doctor stood up, shaking his head. Impressive. Truly impressive. Only 3 days, Naruto-san, there's no reason why you can't go now. I believe they are holding some of your affairs at the Hokage's office, so you should check there before you go home. Naruto smiled brightly. Thanks, medic-san. 15 minutes later, Naruto was near the Hokage's office door. He ignored the disapproving look of the receptionist to walk straight up to it and listen for a moment. Not hearing any voices, he simply walked in. The office was as he had seen it before. The old man was sitting at his desk, doing some form of paperwork. He looked up and smiled to see Naruto. Hello, Naruto. You're here for this, I suppose? He held up the kunai that had sat at Naruto's bedside the 3 days before. Yeah, thanks. Naruto took the knife and stowed it in a pocket, making sure to keep the blade away from his skin. But I had some questions. Yes? Said the Hokage, sighing somewhat, as he thought he could guess what the questions were. I woke up this morning and it was all gone. The lines, everything, Naruto said. But yesterday, once you had me in that darkness jutsu thing, he wiggled his fingers to illustrate, I saw something kinda weird. The Hokage tensed. What was that? It was like, there was this big red aura, and I could see all red even though I still just saw the darkness from the jutsu, right? And then this voice talked to me, when I was going crazy and yelling what are the lines, and it said something like the lines are death, and you see with my eyes. And it was just, weird. So do you know anything about that? The Hokage sighed further. He had hoped to postpone this revelation until far later, but the demon fox was already, apparently, inside Naruto's mind. It was only fair to tell him what was happening. You see, Naruto, this is going to take some explanation. Naruto began to fidget again as the Hokage finished explaining. The demon fox? Really? Yes, Naruto. You have to understand, the Yondaime had no other option. He did not choose to do this on a whim, and he sacrificed his life to do it. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I get that, but is that why everyone seems to hate me? Because the fox is in me? Why? The Sandaime sighed again. You have to understand, Naruto, that most of the people who hate you for this are civilians. They don't quite understand the idea behind the seal. They simply know that you hold the demon, and they think that they are getting revenge on the demon by attacking you. And because my law prevents them from telling anyone or inciting hatred directly, they just what they do. Naruto nodded grimly. I do. He sat quietly for a moment. But this whole thing with the lines, that wasn't expected, was it? No. The fox said that you were seeing with its eyes, but we don't know why that would happen. It could be. The Hokage was silent for a moment, then continued. The fox makes you heal faster than normal people, Naruto. You healed from some very terrible injuries in only 3 days, and part of that was taken up by your adverse reaction to the lines. This drew a sheepish grin from Naruto. We don't know, but it may be pushing its chakra out to heal you there. Perhaps pushing enough to heal you from such a nasty beating activated you seeing like it does somehow. We don't know. Naruto sighed. He shook his head. Ojaizen, I don't want to be a bother, but will it come back? Even now that it's gone, he shuddered. I didn't like that at all. The Hokage gave him a sad smile. I don't know, Naruto. I can only speculate. I think that if you avoid such injuries, they should not recur very soon. Your healing is quite remarkable, and to provide such results must take an enormous amount of power. That this power should carry along such an effect is not surprising, I suppose. It is a demon, after all. He sighed. Naruto. If you see them again, come to me. Should you begin having such symptoms again, I can place you in darkness. You may find this tedious, but it would be better than the alternative. Naruto nodded, slowly. It would. It still bothers me, though, that it happens. I mean, what else don't we know about the, he gestured to his stomach, seal thing. The Sandaime thought about this for a moment. Naruto, I would like to make you an offer. The boy shifted. What's that, Ojizen? I'm going to give you access to the Konoha archives, like a full ninja would have. Not a genin either. Usually you need to be Chunin level to get this access. And I'm going to ask in return that you learn as much as you can about Fuinjutsu. Okay? Naruto frowned at him. That seems a little boring, Ojizen. The Hokage's smile became wider and knowing. Ah, but little you know. Naruto, which branch of the ninja arts is used to create exploding tags? Naruto froze for several seconds. They had seen exploding tags demonstrated, of course, and it was an upcoming lesson to learn to trigger them with their own chakra. However, they were most emphatically not allowed to purchase tags for themselves, and the academy supplies were kept well hidden away. Then he smiled broadly. Oh, that sounds fun, Ojizen. And was that a bit of a gleeful smirk hidden under his usual grin? I'm sure it does, Naruto. And I think that you might find Fuinjutsu to be of use in, shall we say, other ways, that some might consider a little outside the norm. But the Hokage had straightened, and his smile was gone. They may not look it, and you will find some who look down on them. But seals are the most dangerous ninja art. Both to your enemies and to you. You have my leave to study up to a certain level on your own. You are not to go beyond that level, and whatever you make is to be used safely. He looked down at Naruto, very serious. The reason I ask you to do this, Naruto, is because of your status. The seal which holds the fox inside you is the fourth masterpiece of Fuinjutsu. There are many shinobi in the village who know some of that art, and none of them will stint their help with it, if you need. But you will always have the greatest access to it, and perhaps some insight unavailable from the outside. You will not reach that level for a while, but in the long run, you must learn Fuinjutsu to defend yourself against what you hold inside. Do you understand? Naruto gulped a bit, but stared back at the Hokage with resolution. I got it, Ojizen. He took a breath, and his grin began to return. And thanks. Naruto sighed as he left the academy. It seemed that he did not get time off the academy for any longer than he was in the hospital for, and he had stayed up most of the previous night reading the first sealing scroll the old man had given him. He had woken up in a panic and dashed out the door, far too late to make his usual lunch. He was starving, and he didn't have enough money right now to go to Ichiraku-san's place for ramen. He walked tiredly home, looking forwards only slightly to eating the mere instant ramen available there. Hyuga Hinata walked along some way behind him. She had been worried when Naruto simply disappeared for 3 days after the Yandaime's festival, but when he came back he seemed healthy, if tired. He seemed less engaged, though, less attentive even than usual, and he would occasionally, when he thought no one was looking, give a sigh and shake his head as if to dislodge something. However, today he had, for the first time, actually forgotten his lunch, and as was usual she had packed double so that, if he did, she could offer him food. She had missed the opportunity to give it to him at lunch, but mustering all her courage, she moved faster and caught up with Naruto. Ano Naruto-kun, she trailed off, losing her nerve as he turned to her. Ah? Hello, Hinata-san, he said, giving her his usual broad grin. She ducked her head and said nothing. Hinata-san? He asked. You didn't eat lunch today, she said in a rush. I have some food left over. If you want, she offered him the portion of her lunch that she had not touched. Naruto looked at her, his expression puzzled. Ah, thank you, Hinata-san. He took the second bento. Why are you offering this to me? Hinata ducked her head even further, and blushed. I know you didn't eat lunch and you looked hungry. And, you looked a little bit tired today, and she trailed off. Naruto was silent for a moment, then smiled at her, and it seemed different than his usual brash grin, more real, somehow. Thank you, Hinata-san. I should give your bento back to you. Do you mind just waiting here? She shook her head quickly. No, that's fine. Whatever you want, Naruto-kun. He smiled again, and sat on the rock to eat. The Sandaime Hokage sat in a chair at the head of 2 long tables. Along the table to his right were arrayed the shinobi half of Konoha's council. To his left were the civilians. To the right, each face was composed, except Nara Shikaku's, which was asleep. To the left, most of the faces were enraged. This is an outrage, sputtered the tall, portly civilian who stood in his place to the left. He had been speaking for the past 5 minutes, basically repeating the same points over and over. Firstly, that he had been foully burgled. Secondly, that there had been traps laid for him. Thirdly, that he was a citizen of Konoha, after all, and demanded some security. Fourthly, that the brat had gone too far this time. And fifthly, that said brat should be executed for the crime of, apparently, existing. The remainder of the civilians were not particularly happy either. Perhaps half of them bore the signs of having recently and hurriedly cleaned themselves off, including the indignant merchant who was standing, the owner, the Hokage recalled, of a moderately large bakery. As the loudmouthed man finished at long last, several other civilians spoke up, telling similar stories, lest the burglary. It seemed that, early this morning, the owners or employees of many village retail institutions, notably, the Hokage noticed with remarkable grumpiness, those convenient to Uzumaki Naruto's route from his apartment to the academy and back, had entered their places of business to find crude trip-string traps linked, somehow, to storage seals containing large amounts of flour. The bakery owner had found a similar trap, then, after, the Hokage surmised, sputtering in rage for at least half an hour and repeatedly skirting the edges of his law regarding the Jinchuriki, discovered that half his latest shipment of flour, 4 barrels in all, was missing. It was now assumed that this was the source of the flour in the traps. After hearing the civilians out, and shutting several of them up with killing intent when they came too close to the word demon, the Hokage turned to the ninja side of the council. Have any similar traps been found on clan lands? No traps were laid on Aburame land. Aburame's shibi was unreadable as usual. No traps were laid on Akimichi land. Akimichi Chuza did not seem too concerned. Chuza poked at Shikaku, who was next to him. No traps were laid on Nara land. He went back to sleep. No traps were laid on Yamanaka land. Yamanaka Inoichi seemed almost amused. No traps were laid on Inuzuka land. There was no almost about Inuzuka Tsume's amusement. A single trap was laid at the gate to the Hyuga compound. It was triggered by Hyuga Makoto-san, who was able to avoid its payload almost entirely. The perpetrator was apparently unable or disinclined to penetrate the compound. Hyuga Hayashi tried for the usual Hyuga impassiveness, but some annoyance leaked through. The Hokage was unable to discern whether this was occasioned by the prank or Hayashi's constitutional objection to the civilian council shouting about things. And I have the previous report of its caretakers that a single trap was laid at the Uchiha clan compound. Thank you. Is anyone claiming damages from the traps alone? There was a clamor from the civilian side of the council, which the Hokage quieted after perhaps 30 seconds. I will clarify. Are there any claims of damages from the traps alone that amount to more than an hour's cleaning work? It is not the village's or the council's duty to compensate civilians for such trivial expenses. The Hokage was rather annoyed, and focused a bit of his annoyance on the noisemakers. The silence that followed was grudging, but silent nonetheless. Very well. Since it appears that none of the traps caused noticeable damages, we will close that matter there. Tsukura-kura. The annoyed bakery owner who had been venting earlier stood up. You have sustained damages equal to half of one weekly shipment of flour, correct? That amount, plus the expense of rush ordering another shipment, Hokage-sama. Very well. You will submit a bill of expenses to the Hokage's office, and you will be compensated in full. Are you satisfied? No, by Kami, I'm not satisfied. What about the brat? He can't get away with this. You are remarkably quick to assume the guilt of Uzumaki Naruto, Kuda-san. Though it was probably a decent assumption even without the Hokage's insider knowledge of what Naruto had been studying in the archives the past 2 years. The perpetrator will be found, and punished accordingly. This punishment does not concern you. You are being compensated. Are you satisfied? The man grumbled for a moment before replying. I am satisfied. Thank you. Now, that matter is closed. Are there any motions to bring before this special session? A man on the civilian side stood up. I move that, on the authority of the council, Uzumaki Naruto be put to death for the security of Konohagakure. The Hokage sighed deeply. The motion is heard. Votes will be taken in favor, opposed, or abstain. Civilian Council, vote. Predictably enough, the vote on the Civilian Council was overwhelmingly in favor. The Hokage noted a few carefully hidden smirks on the faces of the few who voted opposed. He spoke again once the vote had finished. The vote is logged. Shinobi Council, vote. Clan Aburame, opposed? Clan Akimichi, opposed? Shikaku did not even have to be poked awake this time. Clan Nara, opposed. Clan Yamanaka, opposed. Clan Inuzuka, opposed. Clan Hyuga, opposed. The Hokage gave Hayashi a sharp look. These motions usually gained his favor, which he returned without acknowledgement. Proxy vote for Clan Uchiha is in the hands of the Hokage. Clan Uchiha, opposed. The motion passes the Civilian Council. The motion fails the Shinobi Council. The motion is vetoed by the Hokage. The motion fails. The Sandaime side. The Hokage dismisses this special session on his own authority. Disperse. The shinobi all stood, nearly as one, and shunshined away. The civilians made their way out the door opposite the Hokage in a more conventional fashion, and the Hokage sat wearily in his chair for another minute, then left. Uzumaki Naruto walked into the academy, where there was an uproar. He would guess that few of his classmates had been up and about sufficiently early to actually see it, but the sight of perhaps 25 bleached white civilian merchants running frantically back home from their shops to wash off had gotten into the rumor mill with glee. As he walked into the classroom, a wave of, if not silence, less noise swept out away from his point of entry, those students who noticed his entrance and had inferred his responsibility becoming silent on seeing him. He ignored it, walking straight to his seat and sitting down. He noticed with some satisfaction that the stuck-up bastard was not yet present, probably still cleaning himself off. Hinata, sitting next to him, blushed slightly at his approach. "Ah, Naruto-kun?" He turned to her. "Yes, Hinata-chan? Did you make the flower traps?" He grinned at her. "Now, Hinata-chan, would I do something like that?" She looked down, but she was smiling, and there was almost a giggle in her next words. "You should not do such things, Naruto-kun." Makoto-san was very angry. "Well, I'm very sorry that Hyuga Makoto-san is angry, and I'm sure the person who laid all those traps did a very bad thing." Naruto smiled at her. The conversation, so far, had fallen under the cloak of all the other conversations happening at the same time. Now all conversation stopped as Iruka-sensei opened the door and walked into the room. He stopped at his desk and began speaking. "Class, be silent." This was mostly a formality, as the class was silent already. "I have instructions to tell the students the following. An incident occurred this morning involving, the gates of the Hyuga and Uchiha estates, and the doors, front hallways, and bathroom doors of multiple civilian retail establishments throughout the village. The named locations were trapped with rudimentary Fuinjutsu flower traps, presumably set up last night. A hunt for the perpetrator is currently ongoing." Several people looked at Naruto, and the majority who did not were clearly exerting heroic willpower to avoid it. "That is all the information available. Thank you. We are now going to begin our lesson," he said with a fulminating glance at Naruto, with a re-examination of the class proficiency in the Henj no Jutsu. "Please line up at the front of the class." Several students gave Naruto mild glares at this, which he ignored. Everyone filed up to the front and lined up. It was at this point that Uchiha Sasuke walked in the door. His appearance was not rumpled in the least, for which Naruto had to give him credit, but he gave Naruto a nasty look as he took his place at the end of the line. Quiet repetitions of hench filled the classroom as they filed up one by one to complete the jutsu. Naruto basically ignored the other students until it became his turn. He stepped forwards, the form he wanted held in his mind, hench. The smoke cleared. Iruka, his face suddenly twitching, was looking at a transformation that was, indeed, a perfect copy of him, except that he was wearing white pajamas embroidered with bright pink rabbits. Naruto as Iruka grinned. "So, sensei, do I pass?" Iruka twitched several more times before replying. Naruto wasn't sure whether he was holding back amusement or annoyance, but if he had read Iruka correctly before, it would be amusement. Iruka's deadpan reply seemed to confirm it. "I'll mark your henj as proficient and your ability to respect a teacher as needs work," he said. "Get back to your seat already." Naruto released the transformation and walked back. Naruto walked into the Hokage's office, his movements painful. Maybe that trap on the Uchiha compound hadn't been such a good idea after all. Sasuke team had beaten him bloody in taijutsu practice that day. He might almost believe that he had touched a nerve. Ah well. He would have to console himself with the thought that he could easily have replaced the flower in the trap with a few kunai, or an explosive tag. There was more to being a ninja than the ability to punch people efficiently. The old man was sitting behind his desk, writing something. He looked up as Naruto walked in. "Hello, Naruto. Thank you for coming." Naruto grinned. "Hi, Ojizen." The Hokage smiled at Naruto and gestured him to sit. "Now we need to talk about all those flower traps." Naruto burst out in mock indignation. "Hey! How do you know it was me who set those?" The Hokage sighed. "Did you?" "Well, yes. But I'm offended that you would assume I did. Your offense is noted and completely ignored. Now back to the traps. Have you been going further than I gave you permission to? Trap seals are past that. You shouldn't be able to do anything with a seal without activating it yourself." Naruto smirked broadly at the memory. "Oh yeah? No, I haven't been reading ahead. What I did was I used this old and kinda broken storage seal, and I wrote it on 2 different pieces of paper, and then when someone hit the tripwire it yanked them apart, so the seal just got really broken. And that old broken storage seal makes all its stuff like explode out if it's broken without chakra activating. So yeah?" The Hokage smiled. "Interesting. I would not have expected that. So, you haven't been going too far ahead, which is good. There's still the matter of the flower you stole." Naruto sighed. "Ojizen, the guy's an asshole." The Hokage nodded. "I'm aware of that. I've been dealing with him in council all morning, thanks to you." Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Sorry, Ojizen." Asshole or not, Naruto, there are strict laws regarding ninjas victimizing civilians. I can keep you away from those because you're not technically a ninja yet. I wouldn't, if I didn't know you were deliberately targeting people who treated you shabbily. But in any event, I've guaranteed compensation from the village to the man who owns that bakery. In punishment for theft, Uzumaki Naruto, I am fining you by the amount which the village will pay in compensation. This payment will come in the form of half your living stipend and mission payments from now until the debt is paid. Naruto groaned. Ojisayan. The Hokage smiled. Off the record, Naruto, I think it was quite a well-conceived prank, and shows impressive knowledge of Fuinjutsu. However, if you're going to break laws, you have to be prepared to serve the consequence. Dismissed. Naruto got to his feet reluctantly. Hi, Ojisan. The Hokage waved him out. Goodbye, Naruto. Naruto sat in the academy classroom next to Hinata, sweating. It was the day of the final exam, and Iruka had chosen the Bunshin no Jutsu for the technique to test on. Just my luck, the thing I've never practiced at all. Hinata was called first. She went off after quietly wishing him good luck. None of the people who were called came back, so he couldn't ask her how she had done. Drat, he fidgeted until he was called. Iruka-sensei and Mizuki-sensei were in the room alone, Iruka standing behind a table full of new Hittite, Mizuki beside him. Naruto walked up to the spot in front of the table. Iruka smiled. All right, Naruto, show me a Bunshin no Jutsu. You should be able to create at least 3 clones. Naruto gulped and concentrated. He formed the appropriate seals, then, concentrating chakra, he yelled Bunshin no Jutsu. He felt the chakra drain and, panicking lest he not give it enough, pushed more chakra at the technique. There was a sudden release, but it felt warped, somehow. Naruto waited for the smoke to clear, only to see a single clone, looking like a slightly bleached zombie, lying beside him. He groaned. Iruka had raised an eyebrow. Really? Your henge was better than that. Unfortunately, Naruto, this does not satisfy the requirements. You fail. Naruto groaned more loudly and walked out of the room. Naruto sat on the swing outside, dejected. He had failed. His life was just going along perfectly well, and then this happened. Why did he have to fail? Hinata had come up to him earlier, correctly interpreting his saddened demeanor. She had offered him good wishes, hopes to see him again. It was kind of her. She had seemed almost as dejected by his failure as he was. She, of course, had passed. Whether or not her actual fighting style would ever use anything so pedestrian as the Academy Jutsu, it would be the ultimate shame for any Hyuga to fail the Academy test. Naruto was sitting there, trying and failing to think coherently about what he would do next, when Mizuki-sensei approached him. You shouldn't blame Iruka-sensei, you know, he said. He's trying to ensure that you become stronger. I don't, said Naruto, his voice muffled by his arms. I know he couldn't have done anything different, it's just, I don't know what to do now. Ah, that's hard, said Mizuki. Having to stay back a year, not with your friends anymore, it would be a great pity. Naruto groaned. This seemed to be a common vocalization of his lately. I know. I just can't figure it out. I just wish I hadn't failed. Mizuki waited, just the right amount of time. Well, you know. Naruto sat in a forest clearing, a huge, elaborate scroll sitting in front of him. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu had been difficult to learn, difficult, indeed, but he had done it. In only an hour, too. He sat back, nearly exhausted and panting, but with a wide grin on his face. He could graduate now. He wouldn't need to skip a year, wouldn't need to fall behind. He could surprise Hinata-chan and make her smile. Fast approaching footsteps through the trees alerted him. Iruka-sensei jumped down from within them, landing on both feet in the clearing just ahead. Naruto grinned broadly at him, but there was something wrong. Iruka's face was tense, and he looked at Naruto almost coldly. Naruto! What are you doing with that scroll? Ne Iruka-sensei, that's the secondary graduation test, isn't it? I learned a jutsu. Now I get to graduate, right? Iruka looked at him as if he had grown another head. Where in Kami's name did you get that idea? Mizuki-sensei told me. He said that if I got this scroll and learned a jutsu out of it, I could graduate along with the other kids. That wasn't. Naruto stopped talking in reaction to Iruka's suddenly horrified face. Naruto! Get out of here! Mizuki tricked you, he's using you to steal the scroll. Run! Naruto, suddenly horrified, looked around in fear, but it was too late. A volley of kunai flew out of the trees straight towards him. He was moving, but he couldn't move fast enough, the knives were going to hit him. Iruka ran at him, and shoved him out of the way, taking the kunai himself. He was slammed back against the wall of the building behind, a kunai through his leg and another in his arm, breathing hard. Mizuki landed on a tree branch at the edge of the clearing. He was wearing 2 oversized shuriken on his back, and his face was twistedly triumphant. Iruka! I didn't plan for you to find him. But he grinned nastily. You're weak. I can kill you right after I kill him. He pointed at Iruka, then Naruto with a kunai. Iruka looked up, chest heaving, still standing. You call me, weak, but what does it say about, you if you're using academy students to do your stealing for you? Mizuki scowled, a horrible expression. Oh, I can recognize the thing's talents. Right before I do the village a favor by killing it. One last favor, won't it be nice? Naruto looked up suddenly. Mizuki noticed. Oh, the thing hears. Are you curious, brat? Curious why I call you that? He grinned dementedly. Curious why the whole village hates you? Curious why Iruka hates you? Naruto whispered. No. Mizuki did not hear. I'll tell you. Do you know what happened on your birthday, brat? 12 years ago, the nine-tailed fox attacked this village. The Yondaime Hokage gave his life to defeat it, but he couldn't kill it, brat. He could only seal it. He sealed it into a child. You are the nine-tailed fox. You killed everyone 12 years ago. You killed Iruka's parents. They all hate you. Everyone hates you. Demon! Naruto stood up, slowly. No. Resolve shot through his mind. Mizuki had lied to him, had told him that he was the fox. No doubt Mizuki had not known that he already knew about the seal, so he was guilty of deliberately violating the Sandaime's law. Most of all, Mizuki had hurt Iruka. He would die in pain. Naruto began to laugh. Ha! You thought that would faze me? Mizuki scowled and jumped down from the tree. I don't care. Die, demon! He took the huge shuriken off his back and hefted it. Then threw it at Naruto. It turned from a static, four-pointed blade to a spinning, flying disc of death. Naruto could see Iruka, off to the side crouching, preparing to jump into the way, to take the blow. The shuriken spun towards him as Iruka flew over from the right and Naruto simply stepped out of the way, knocking Iruka down and letting the shuriken fly harmlessly past into a tree. He laughed further. You call me demon? You think me demon? Then know a demon. He pulled a kunai from his holster, pulled one of his own, homemade explosive tags out of a pocket, wrapped the note around the handle of the kunai. Then he clenched it in his teeth and crossed his fingers. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There was a burst of smoke that eclipsed the whole clearing. When it cleared the clearing, the trees around, the roof of the building, were all covered in copies of Naruto. The only clear space was a small circle around Mizuki, who looked around frantically, suddenly absolutely horrified. Each clone was glaring at him with death in their eyes, and each clone still had a kunai with an explosive tag wrapped around the handle clenched in its teeth. The 20 or so clones closest to Mizuki activated their tags and threw them at Mizuki. He managed to jump out of the way in time, and a cloud of red glowing tags converged where he had been, then exploded hugely. Mizuki, still in the air, was a sitting target for the next 20 clones doing the same thing. This time, most of the kunai hit. Mizuki was wreathed in red for a moment before the tags exploded. A mangled body was catapulted out of the blast, Mizuki barely recognizable, his clothes burned through. Mizuki was almost certainly dead by this point, but that didn't stop the remainder of the clones. Each one threw their kunai straight at Mizuki's body. They hit as he topped his arc, 100 little red glowing motes congregating on him. Then they exploded. By some quirk of position, this explosion sent Mizuki down instead of up. His body, now completely unrecognizable, shot straight down from the sky and collided with the ground. The explosion, high above the forest, blew leaves off the trees. Then there was silence. The clones all dispersed, one by one. The original Naruto stood there, silent, staring at Mizuki's body. He was horrified. He had meant to kill Mizuki, but he hadn't intended such overkill. His voice, when it came, was almost, but not quite emotionless. Guess I went a little too hard, huh? Iruka, still sitting on the ground, gaped at him. Then Naruto noticed something. There, on the ground around Mizuki, was a loose grid of spidery lines. He looked around, beginning to panic. The lines. The horribly familiar lines. They were everywhere, they were coming back. Naruto crumpled, screaming, and clenched his eyes shut. The Hokage sat in a side room off his office, one with a bed in it. He couldn't imagine why there was a superfluous bedroom here, but it was useful. Naruto lay on the bed, his eyes closed. Iruka sat beside him on a different chair. Mizuki's body had been collected. The Hokage had seen it, before it was disposed of. Naruto was certainly powerful. He hoped the experience hadn't been too painful for the boy. Iruka had just finished his report of what had happened. He had had to knock Naruto out to carry him back here. Any attempt to move him while conscious had resulted in his struggling wildly to escape. The Hokage had brought him in here. He was the only one who knew how to deal with Naruto's Kyuubi-induced craziness. The Hokage turned to Naruto, still unconscious, and sighed. Time to try and help the boy. He reached out to his forehead, medical chakra flickering on his hand, and woke him up. Naruto's eyes opened. They flicked wildly around the room, and Naruto tensed up. Before he could move or scream, the Hokage had finished the seals. Kokwanjyo no Jutsu. Naruto relaxed in the sudden darkness. The Hokage spoke. Naruto. Can you hear me? It took a moment for him to reply. I hear you, Ojaizen. What's happening? I've placed you under a genjutsu to prevent you seeing things. You've been acting like you did that time 2 years ago. Iruka just got back from the forest with you. What's happening? Ojaizen, they came back. I had just killed Mizuki, and then the lines came back. A note of strain entered Naruto's voice talking about them, even without seeing. The Hokage made his voice as gentle as possible. It's all right, Naruto. You can't see them now. Try to remain calm. He paused for several breaths before continuing. I've heard what happened from Iruka. You don't need to talk about it. I'd like to ask you about the lines. All right? Naruto nodded, still lying on the bed, his eyes open, if unseeing. All right. I had just killed him, and his body fell down, and then I was looking at it, and I saw the lines again, and remembered he shuddered. And I guess kinda went crazy, and then the next thing I remember is waking up here. The Hokage nodded before remembering that Naruto couldn't see him. All right, Naruto. Iruka is here. I'm going to explain to him what's going on, and then I'll want to ask you something. All right? Okay, Ojaizen. The Hokage turned to Iruka. This is related to something that happened to Naruto 2 years ago. You remember when he was absent? Iruka nodded. He was absent because he was ambushed by a couple of former Chunin in an alley and beaten. Really badly. And during his recovery, he started seeing some sort of manifestation, a grid of lines on everything, and later on he started to see things and people fall apart along the lines. It took some toll on his mind. The effect went away after he was recovered. We suspect it's related to the fox. Iruka nodded again, his face sober. So those are the lines he's talking about? They are. We know it's not a genjutsu or anything. I had Kurenayan to check on him. We don't really know anything about the effect, but it happened when he was healing up from the worst he was ever injured in his life and when he had just used up a whole lot of chakra, both times when you'd expect the fox's chakra to be active in him. And there's something else. He turned to Naruto and spoke. Naruto, something happened 2 years ago. You had just gone crazy, and you were able to cut up a side table with a kunai. Do you remember? Naruto nodded. Yeah, I do. That kind of convinced me it wasn't a dream, when I woke up the day afterwards and saw it still cut up. What about it? Naruto, I'm going to take the genjutsu off you now. If you start seeing anything break, I can put it back on you, but I want to check something. Okay? Naruto hesitated before nodding. Okay. Go ahead. The Hokage broke the technique, and Naruto's eyes moved again with purpose. He sat up. What did you want to check? Can you still see lines? Naruto looked around. Yeah, it's a little fainter. Like I can't see them on something until I really look. But yeah. He took a deep breath. Do you remember what you did when you broke the table 2 years ago? Yeah. I was trying to stab the line. I don't know what I thought it would have done. But the kunai just kind of traced along it, and the table broke. Same thing happened with the legs. The Hokage handed Naruto a kunai which he took from his own holster. Then he cast about for something to test it on. Iruka, would you mind standing? I'd like to use that chair. Not at all, Hokage-sama. Iruka stood, and the Hokage reached over to his chair and handed it to Naruto. I want you to do the same thing that you did 2 years ago with the desk. Just trace the lines on the chair. See what happens. Naruto took the chair and set it on its legs in front of him. Peering at it closely, he frowned and placed his kunai on the edge of the seat, then traced it along the top to the other side. The Hokage could clearly see that he wasn't pressing hard enough even to scratch the paint. Then, without warning, as Naruto reached the other side of the seat and removed the knife, the chair split in 2 pieces along the line Naruto had traced. His eyes widened as the pieces fell over, no longer stable with only 2 legs apiece. He picked up the front half of the chair and tried again, this time tracing along the seat between the 2 legs. The piece broke again, and the half that Naruto wasn't holding fell to the ground. Looking fascinatedly down at the fragment, Naruto cut diagonally along the leg, and it, too, broke, showing a wide stripe of unpainted wood. Then he cut it again. Then again. The Hokage caught Naruto's hand before he could bisect the chair leg any further. I think that's enough. Naruto jerked suddenly, then relaxed, dropping the kunai. Sorry, Ojaizen. Can you put the darkness back now? It's a little bit weird. The Hokage nodded and repeated the genjutsu. Well, this is very interesting. Naruto, I think that the lines should go away soon, as your chakra builds up again and pushes out the foxes. We can just wait the rest of the night. You should sleep if you can. Naruto nodded and lay back on the bed. All right, Ojaizen. The Hokage looked at Irika, and they exchanged a nod. It was some 5 hours later that Naruto woke up. He opened his eyes to find that the old man had cancelled the darkness genjutsu sometime during the night. Early morning light shone through the window, and Naruto jumped out of bed, suddenly energized. The room was empty when he woke, but as he got up he heard movement outside the door, and a moment later Irika-sensei walked in. He grinned brightly as he saw Naruto. "Hey Naruto. Sit there and close your eyes." He indicated a spot on the floor. Naruto sat, and closed his eyes as ordered. There was a sound as Irika knelt on the floor in front of him, and he felt something pulling on his forehead, then a tension around his head. Irika fiddled with something at the back of his head for a moment, then pulled away. "You can open your eyes now." Naruto opened his eyes. Irika, still grinning, sat before him. "I, Yumino Irika, as the teacher of Uzumaki Naruto and in consultation with the Sandaime Hokage, do now declare that Uzumaki Naruto has successfully graduated the Ninja Academy." Naruto groped blindly at his forehead for a moment, and felt a familiarly engraved plate of metal. He grinned hugely, barely refraining from whooping with delight, as he jumped on Irika and hugged him. After receiving his Hittite, Naruto was sufficiently euphoric to run out and start doing missions that day. However, as the Hokage explained, that was not yet an option. Naruto walked into the room. It was one of the academy classrooms, but not one that Naruto had ever frequented. 2-person desks filled the room in tiers. He was not late, but the majority of his class had already arrived. Hinata was sitting at a desk next to someone else, whose name he did not know. He stopped beside her desk and grinned at her. "Hey, Hinata-chan." Hinata looked quickly up at him, as if startled. She must have been really distracted. Normally, even without her eyes, she could see most of the things around her. Her eyes flicked first to his face, then to the Hittite around his forehead. "And Naruto-kun, you graduated?" She smiled brightly, making him feel suddenly almost as absurdly happy again as when he had gotten the Hittite from Irika-sensei. "Yeah. Some stuff happened," and here his smile faltered for a moment, "last night, which I can't really explain, but it worked out with me getting a merit promotion. So yeah." He grinned broadly again, casting around for a seat. The one next to Hinata-chan was already taken, so he sat down in the nearest empty one, which, he noticed only as he sat down, put him next to Sasuke's team. "Great." Sasuke turned and looked at him levelly as he sat, but there was no particular malice in the gaze, and in only a moment he turned back to staring at nothing in particular. Naruto humphed quietly at being ignored, and settled firmly into ignoring the Uchiha in turn. There was a clatter from the door at the rear of the room, and the sounds of loud female argument. Naruto did not turn around. He recognized the voices of Sakura and whatever her name was who always fought with her, both of whom he disliked, Sakura in particular for hitting him when he tried to ask her out once a year ago, and the other just on principle for her ardent and painfully obviously unrequited pursuit of her Sasuke-kun. He ignored them, too. Until Sakura stormed up beside him and demanded that he move, so that she could sit beside, oh joy, her Sasuke-kun. "What?" said Naruto, looking up, rather confused. "No. I'm sitting here. Find somewhere else." He turned back to looking forward, expecting the matter to be finished, and so was startled and annoyed when Sakura grabbed him by the wrist and dragged him out of the chair, dropping him behind it. Sakura was about to sit down in the chair she had just yanked him out of, when the other girl, the blonde, moved up and disputed her right to it. Sakura brushed her off, claiming first come, first served. At this, one of the other girls who already had a seat, who had begun to pay attention when Sakura had knocked him out of the chair, stood up and claimed seniority over Sakura. This set off a wave of other fangirls vacating their seats and disputing who had entered the room first. Many of them had, indeed, come in before Naruto, which set him to wondering why they hadn't just sat beside their precious Uchiha when the seat was empty. The dispute was approaching the point where it might very well have erupted into physical combat when Naruto stood up. He was still behind the desk, standing between the mob of fangirls and the Uchiha, whose level stare at nothing had become distinctly annoyed and long-suffering. Said Naruto, very loudly. This preempted several volleys in the war of the fangirls, and they all became silent and stared at him. Naruto illustrated his words with large, pointed gestures as he spoke. "I," said he, pointing at himself, "am going to sit here." He indicated the chair that was the object of contention. "The reason for this is that I actually sat here. So all of you kindly buzz off." He sat down and pointedly stared ahead. The fangirls were, for a moment, shocked silent. Then Sakura growled in anger and again grabbed at Naruto's wrist to deprive him of the seat. She was just about to yank him off the chair again when he broke her grip, causing her to reel backwards for a moment before regaining her balance. Things might have gone badly for Naruto at that point, being at the focus of the ire of the fangirlish mob, if Irika had not at that moment walked in the door. He saw almost a third of the class congregated around a single desk, and loudly cleared his throat. Excuse me, he shouted, his head seeming to grow by a factor of 3 or so. Naruto had never figured out if that was some sort of genjutsu or merely a psychological effect of being screamed at by Iruka. The group of girls turned towards him. Will this group of new ninja, now legally adults and considered capable of acting maturely in most situations, please sit down? Said Iruka. The fangirls dispersed, some grumbling quietly. Sakura made a pointed sniff and moved off to take one of the closest seats to Sasuke, which had actually been occupied by another of the fangirls. That girl disputed the seat for only a moment before finding a different one. Iruka smiled without a trace of his earlier menace. Thank you? He then launched into an explanation of the system of teams, most of which seemed designed to, having stoked the egos of the new genin with their shiny new Hokage, cut them back down to size for their participation in the world of real ninja. Naruto tuned most of it out. One could not read any of the village history that he had read in the Konoha archives without both the relatively lowly status of genin and the structure of their teams becoming obvious. The lecture ended with Iruka's preparation to list off the teams themselves. Naruto perked up and began to pay attention. No one he knew was on any of the first 6 teams called. Then, Team 7. Uzumaki Naruto, Harino Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto groaned quietly to himself. The team and the annoying fangirl. Well, at least Sasuke team was an effective ninja. Hopefully no one would expect them to fight anything for a while. He had kind of hoped to be on a team with Hinata-chan, but he supposed that they could still get together and spar or something. Hinata-chan was hard, even though she wasn't nearly as strong as he was. When she turned on her eyes he just couldn't hit her unless he got a lucky shot. He couldn't think of a better way to get faster. And speaking of which, Team 8. Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino. Naruto knew the Kiba kid for that dog which he always carried around on his head, and the Shino kid for, basically, being very tall and a little bit weird. He hoped they were good teammates for Hinata. Naruto sighed. The last team to be chosen had left with their sensei almost 15 minutes ago, leaving him, the team and the fangirl alone in the room. Naruto had become bored and started pacing 5 minutes ago, and Sakura had, much to the Uchiha's quietly expressed annoyance, taken the opportunity to steal the seat next to him. Sasuke sat in the same position that he had held, without change, for most of the class. He basically ignored Sakura's sitting next to him, and sneaking glances at him, and completely ignored Naruto's pacing and muttering. After a good hour of this, Naruto was quite thoroughly annoyed, as well as bored. Weren't the Jounin senseis supposed to be good role models? Why was he being so late? With a snort of annoyance, Naruto came to a decision. He hunted up a sheet of paper in the desk at the front of the room, then grabbed the canister of mostly spent chalk from the floor below the blackboard at the front, and sat down at a desk. He removed a brush and ink, the basic sealing kit, from his pockets and began to sketch the same obsolete storage seal that he had used in the flower traps. When the seal was done, he dumped the canister of chalk onto it and sealed it inside with an application of chakra. Then he set the seal at the top of the doorframe, standing on a chair to do so, and attached it to both the frame and the door so that the door would tear it apart if it opened. The others had been watching this work, being the most interesting thing happening in the classroom. Sakura was taken aback by the sealing and did not comment, though she evidently wished to. Sasuke turned to look at the sealed paper stuck through the top of the doorframe. A Jounin isn't going to fall for that trick, Fuinjutsu. Naruto grinned brightly. Well, you never know. Sakura decided at this point to step in. Idiot! You're laying a trap for our sensei. You're going to get in trouble. Naruto rolled his eyes. He's late, it's annoying. Even if he doesn't fall for it, it may be entertaining to watch. Sakura was about to continue the debate when they heard a footstep outside the door. All 3 genin quieted and turned to look. A hand in a blue, fingerless glove pushed the door open. The seal tore in two, and there was a minor explosion. Chalk dust filtered down from above, and there was a momentary rain of used-up chalk ends. A white-haired man walked into the room through the now dispersing cloud of chalk dust. Oddly enough, he didn't seem to get any of it on him. It would have been hard to tell if there was chalk in his hair, but one would assume that it would show up on his blue face mask. All 3 genin stared at him for a moment before he spoke. Well, I have to say that as a first impression, this leaves something to be desired. There was silence for a moment, and the Jounin spoke again. Meet on the roof of this building in 5 minutes. Then, without ceremony, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The 3 genin sat on benches atop the academy building, while the white-haired, masked man leaned against the railing around the edge. The Jounin's face was unreadable, but he spoke in a mildly bored tone. So, why don't we introduce ourselves? Tell us your names, your hobbies, what you like and don't like, your goals. How about you, pink hair? Sakura bristled at the name. Shouldn't you introduce yourself first, sensei? The Jounin nodded. Okay. My name is Hatake Kakashi. I like some things, but there are things I dislike. I have some hobbies. My goals. He was quiet for a moment, then continued. Okay, pink hair, your turn. Sakura glared at him, but spoke anyway. My name is Haruno Sakura. I like. She blushed slightly and looked at Sasuke. I don't like loud-mouthed brats who can't keep quiet. This with a glare at Naruto. My hobbies. She blushed again and looked at Sasuke. Goals. I suppose I want a family someday. This with another glance at Sasuke. Kakashi nodded. Okay, your turn. Rudimentary seal traps. Naruto grinned at the reference. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, Iruka-sensei, Hokage Ojaizen, and the bit of the archive with the seals in it. I don't like. Here his enthusiasm flagged for a moment. Well, a lot of people are idiots. My hobbies are eating ramen and figuring out fun ways of using seals. My goal is to become Hokage. Kakashi raised one eyebrow, which was the only expression, Naruto thought, that anyone could actually read on his face, and nodded. Okay, staring at nothing. Go. Sasuke shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like, well, not many things. I dislike weakness. This with a glance at Sakura, who squeaked slightly, and tricks. This with a glance at Naruto, who glared at him. My hobby is training. My goal, my ambition is to revive my clan, and kill a certain person. At this, Naruto's glare turned to a mixture of interest and alarm. He stared at Sasuke for a moment, as if he would say something, but was cut off by Kakashi. Okay, well, at least you three aren't boring. So, we begin tomorrow, meeting at 5 a.m. at Training Ground 13. It's a training mission of sorts. Don't be late. And, he finished, standing up and turning around, don't eat breakfast. You'll just throw it up. Naruto showed up at the bridge leading to Training Ground number 13 at 5 precisely the next morning. This was quite a bit earlier than he was used to getting up. He had had to sleep early to make sure he wasn't tired for it. Sakura was already there, standing on the bridge, and after only a few minutes Sasuke team showed up as well. Then, of course, Kakashi didn't show up. They had waited for almost an hour before Naruto lost patience. Don't be late. Don't be late, he says. What's he doing telling us not to be late? Naruto growled, pacing back and forth on the bridge. We weren't late. He's late. Why is he late? Sakura was also annoyed, though she managed to refrain from fidgeting. If he doesn't show up, then I won't get the chance to prove how strong I am to Sasuke-kun, she muttered, almost to herself. Sasuke's comment about weakness the day before had nettled her. Naruto lost what remained of his patience after another hour. The sun had risen some time ago. Sakura sat still with a growing look of annoyance on her face, while Sasuke team just stood, apparently not noticing the passage of time. Naruto got out his sealing brush and ink and started drawing on the wood of the bridge. Rudimentary seal traps, I'll show him rudimentary seal traps, he muttered angrily as he worked. Behind him, and unnoticed, Sasuke turned to look at him, staring rather intently at the matrix of seals that he was constructing. Naruto finished the seal, which looked like another storage seal, then pulled a flash bomb from the pocket where he kept random ninja tools. A tiny seal, just a single symbol, went on the flash bomb, and Naruto pushed it into the storage seal with a flash of chakra. Then he took up a position further down the bridge, across from Sasuke, and drew another seal on the rail near his hand. He looked up for a moment. Sasuke, Sakura, when I set this off you might want to close your eyes. I'm going to do it as soon as I see Kakashi-sensei stepping onto the bridge. Sasuke looked at him with more interest than Naruto had ever seen him show. What does it do? Naruto grinned. It's a self-triggering storage seal. The basis for a lot of trap seals. You can launch something out of it like an explosive tag or a flash bomb and it'll set it off for you. But Hokage Ojaizen won't let me do trap seals yet, this with an ear pout, so I have to set it off myself. Sasuke looked at him more intently for a moment, then shook his head. Fuinjutsu. Naruto rolled his eyes and stood, fidgeting, next to the trigger seal on the rail. He managed to stand ready to trigger the trap for 2 more hours, probably a record for Naruto standing still. Eventually, however, he also became bored and sat. It was half an hour more after that when Kakashi, oblivious to Naruto's careful work in preparing a trap for him, appeared on the wrong side of the bridge, with a bright good morning. You're late, yelled Sakura and Naruto, almost in unison. The 3 genin moved off the bridge to stand in front of Kakashi. Kakashi made precisely no apology for his tardiness, but held up a pair of bells on a string. All right. So, the first thing I should tell you is that this is, actually, the final test to become genin. If you fail this, you go back to the academy. Okay? This was met with disbelief from Sakura. So what was the point of that final exam? She grumbled. Ah, that selects the students who are capable of becoming genin. This selects the student who will become genin. So here's the test. You are going to try and attack me. What you are trying to do is take these bells, he shook the 2 bells back and forth, and they jingled cheerily, from here. He tied the string to his belt. If you have a bell before noon, measured when the sun gets to there, he indicated an arbitrary point in the sky, then you get lunch. Anyone who doesn't have a bell doesn't get any food. Oh, and they have to go back to the academy. Kakashi's expression was unreadable, of course, but his voice was gleeful. Any questions? Sakura spoke first. But sensei, there are only 2 bells, and 3 of us. How observant of you, Sakura. I guess one of you has a problem then. There was a momentary, heavy silence before Sasuke spoke. Sensei, are we to fight all out? Kakashi nodded. Believe me, you'll need to. Don't hold back on my account. Naruto raised a hand. Sensei, last time I fought all out I didn't really like what happened, he said, his voice uncomfortable. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. It might even have been both eyebrows, but the one was hidden under his highlight. Toji Mizuki, wasn't it? Naruto nodded. You don't need to worry about that. Fight as hard as you like. I won't be caught so easily. Naruto nodded in vague relief. Sakura and Sasuke both had been looking at Naruto oddly during this exchange. Before they could ask any questions, Kakashi cut them off. Any more questions? No? Good. The exercise begins in 3, 2, 1, and now. He jumped away from them, landing in the middle of the clearing off the bridge. Naruto stood and shook himself. All right, he said, and charged at Kakashi. As he charged, he formed a familiar cross-hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he yelled, and 10 clones appeared next to him, charging as well. Kakashi found himself under assault by all 11 bodies. It was no contest. He moved more quickly than Naruto had ever seen, blocking every blow aimed at him and dispersing the clones right and left. None of them even came close to the bells on his belt. When Naruto himself attacked, going for the bells rather than any hits on Kakashi, he found himself flying backwards from a particularly hard blow to the forehead. He landed and skidded along the ground, panting. Then stood. All right, let's turn it up a notch. Tajua Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. This time, some 30 clones formed. Half of them charged, while half held back. The half that charged went straight after the bell just like the previous wave, and met a similar lack of success. The half that held back were loading kunai with explosive tags. As Kakashi cut through the first wave of clones with casual ease, the second wave all threw exploding kunai straight at him. Kakashi, not surprised, jumped straight up, letting the exploding kunai land where he was and destroy the remaining assault clones. None of the clones had any kunai ready to attack Kakashi while he was a sitting target in midair, and Naruto cursed himself for not making more. Kakashi landed unmolested and began taking out clones. Predictably enough, none of them could touch him. He plowed straight through the group of them before he came to Naruto himself. This time, Naruto drew a kunai himself and stabbed at Kakashi with it. He blocked the stroke aside with the armor plate on one glove, then turned the overextended arm into a brutal over-the-shoulder throw that left Naruto upside down against a tree. Good. You've gotten lesson 1, fight to kill. You can take the bells off my corpse, said Kakashi loudly. Or you could, if you could actually kill me. Naruto, disoriented from the sudden flip and near concussion, fell over sideways, groaning. Sasuke and Sakura had disappeared from the bridge long since. It was at this point that Sasuke came out from cover and attacked Kakashi, hoping that his taijutsu, well superior to the Dobes, anyway, could succeed where Naruto's clones had failed. Unfortunately, that hope was dashed. Kakashi was too fast. Sasuke managed to avoid any knockout blows like the ones dealt Naruto, but he couldn't get close to the bells. After 2 minutes of straight assault, he had gotten one good shot at them, and had missed. Giving taijutsu up as a bad job, Sasuke jumped back and made a series of seals. Katon, Gakkaku no Jutsu, he muttered, inhaling, and shot a huge fireball out of his mouth at Kakashi. Naruto, having recovered from his disorientation while Sasuke was fighting, sat up and watched, mouth open. Wow, he muttered. I have so got to learn that. The fireball cleared away, leaving a circle of charred, scorched earth. Kakashi was nowhere to be seen. Sasuke looked around, scowling but somewhat panicky. He swiveled around quickly, staring to both sides, above, and then turning again to cover his back. Where is he? He muttered. He stood still for too long. A hand came up out of the ground where he stood, grabbing his ankle. Sasuke panicked for a moment, trying to break the grip, but failed. Then, somehow, it managed to drag him down into the ground? What? Sasuke's head stuck out of the middle of a bare patch of earth as Kakashi rose from the ground as if it were liquid. He crouched in front of Sasuke's apparently disembodied head. In case you missed it, said Kakashi, dry as dust, I was below you. Naruto, completely recovered by this time, started laughing uproariously. Impressive team! He yelled, getting to his feet. Sasuke, luckily for his remaining dignity, was facing sufficiently near Naruto that he could focus on him. Like you did any better, Dobe? He shouted, annoyed. Kakashi stood and faced Naruto as he approached. "Sorry, Sasuke team," said Naruto, getting over his laughter. "It was impressive. It's just also really funny." Sasuke scowled at him. Naruto stood straighter and grinned. "Now I'll show you how it's done. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." With a much greater puff of smoke, clones of Naruto surrounded Kakashi and Sasuke's head to 3 ranks deep. Each clone began preparing an explosive tag on a kunai. Kakashi, knowing what was about to happen, jumped over the group of Narutos to land outside the ring, leaving Sasuke out of the line of fire. Unfortunately, this left him close to several clones, who immediately threw glowing kunai at him. He jumped again, as quickly as he could, and dodged the first volley. Then the second rank of clones threw at him. 100 kunai converged on him, each glowing with the light of an explosive tag, just as the first volley exploded below him. Kakashi quickly made a single seal. When the smoke of the second explosion cleared, a badly charred chunk of log fell to the ground. Clones fanned out, looking for Kakashi. Several approached the bridge over which one arrived at the training ground from the rest of Konoha. Naruto still stood in the ring, approximately where he had been. Kakashi appeared over the bridge, dropping down out of a tree. 2 bells still dangled from his belt where they had been. He walked slowly towards the bridge, as if daring the clones near its other end to attack. A clone shouted, and soon most of the original big mob of them was gathering around the end of the bridge. The original Naruto pushed through the mob to the head of it. "Hey! Kakashi-sensei! Had enough yet?" Kakashi laughed dryly. "Are you going to stand there talking, or are you going to take a bell?" Naruto was on the bridge by now. He glanced around, looking for anything he could use to his advantage, then saw it. He had to stall some more. "Hey, why aren't you attacking? You're only outnumbered 50 to 1. Kakashi rolled his one visible eye. You can only taunt someone without sounding ridiculous if you have even the slightest chance of beating them. With that, he charged. Naruto moved forwards and to the side, several of his clones moving up to fill the gap. Just as Kakashi reached the bridge, Naruto slapped the rail in a burst of chakra and shouted, "Go!" The seal trap Naruto had laid that morning, forgotten when Kakashi had apparently bypassed it, set off. The specialized storage seal spat a single flash bomb up to eye level, where it detonated. Kakashi's one eye widened barely as he saw it, then it went off. A wave of clones rushed forwards to attack. They crossed the bridge in seconds, then milled around on the other side. Kakashi was nowhere to be seen. A clone at the rear of the group yelled a warning. Only a few of the clones managed to turn in time to see Kakashi finishing a group of seals, then slamming one hand into the ground. The earth leapt up in a wave to his command, and that wave swept towards the bridge and the mob of clones. As it hit them, they either dissipated immediately or were thrown into the air to dissipate on landing. The wave stopped as it hit the river. Only the few clones on the bridge itself survived. Kakashi hit them just as hard as he had before. None of the clones survived, or even got near him. Naruto himself was the target of another long throw, back away from the bridge towards Sasuke. He landed, skidded, fell. Kakashi walked up to him. "Wow! You almost made me work there. Okay, enough of you. Let's see if Sakura can get a bell. Maybe she's worth making genin." He disappeared in a sudden cloud of smoke. Naruto stood up, slowly. His body hurt all over. Being repeatedly slammed around by a jounin could, apparently, be considered harmful. He glanced around, checking to see if Kakashi was still around and planning to throw him through pieces of the landscape again, but saw nothing, until he froze, almost panicking, at the sight of countless thin lines on everything in sight. Crap. Crap, crap, crap. It's happening again, damn it. He hyperventilated for a moment, then made a valiant effort to calm down. This is not the time to panic. My promotion is riding on this. He looked around, forcing himself to keep calm at the sight of more of the lines. Hokage Ojizen said that they were related to the fox's chakra, and I just made like 300 clones and got beat up by Kakashi-sensei. That must be it. Just ignore them, that's the ticket. He looked around again, this time forcing himself to ignore the lines and concentrate on what he saw. Still no Kakashi. Sasuke's head stuck out of the ground, facing away from him. It must have driven the boy mad to hear what had been going on behind him without being able to see it. Naruto brooded about the test for a moment. This is annoying. They can't possibly actually make being able to beat a jounin a condition of becoming genin, that'd just be dumb. He couldn't beat Kakashi at all. Hell, Kakashi hadn't even pulled out any high-level techniques until Naruto got the drop on him with a flash bomb in the presence of an army of his clones. Sasuke couldn't beat Kakashi either, and while Sasuke couldn't pull Naruto's one-man army trick, he certainly had more techniques. Naruto wouldn't be surprised if Sasuke could beat him even with all his clones, if he had anything else like that fireball. I can't beat him. Sasuke can't beat him. There's no way in hell Sakura could beat him. What's his game? It couldn't just be an impossible test. There was no way they'd let Jounin senseis pull that on their prospective teams. Suddenly an idea came to Naruto, without any real logic behind it. He decided to run with it. Jogging around Sasuke's head, Naruto made the cross hand sign. 4 clones materialized behind him. Hey Sasuke team. Hey Dobe. I assume from Kakashi's monologue that you didn't get it that time either? Yeah. I've come to a bit of a realization. What's that? It's impossible. What? Look at it. I couldn't beat him. You couldn't beat him. I surprised him with that seal trap I set this morning, and all I got out of it was some really huge class earth jutsu and getting thrown across the field again. HN. Why? I don't know. But I figure I'll get you out of there, just on general principles of frustrating Kakashi-sensei's intent. Naruto and his clones dispersed around Sasuke, digging with kunai. The process was annoying and the tools not ideal. Several of the clones' kunai dispelled on hitting a rock or something, making it go more slowly. Relatively soon, however, they got Sasuke's arms free, and he then cooperated in freeing his legs. Naruto dispelled the rest of his clones with a bit of relief as their chakra poured back into his system. Usually he didn't get tired, but this was a little taxing even for him. Sasuke scrambled out of the newly made hole in the ground, brushing dirt off his clothes. Naruto looked at him and laughed weakly, earning a mild glare. It's not that funny, Dobe. Naruto finished laughing and shook his head. It's not that. But I bet Kakashi-sensei was planning on pulling you out of there with an earth jutsu later on. And it probably would have left you just as clean as he was after he finished, hiding underground. Sasuke grumbled. Thrice cursed over clever teachers, he looked up. Did you have a plan other than going back to what we were doing? Not really, but I've kinda been in the archives all the time since 2 years ago, and they tell you all about these teams, right? Like it looks like the team you were on as a genin is really important later on. They kind of stay together until some of them die, or whatever. And they always talk about teams of 3. There's no teams of 2 anywhere, unless someone on the team died or went rogue. Yeah, okay. So he's probably not going to fail only a few of us, and keep the others. Yeah. I bet that whatever this test is, we either pass it or don't as a team. So I guess there's no harm in working together on it, if we're not fighting each other. Why would that do any better than what we've been doing? He's a jounin. Well, what if you were to henjin to me? Then I could make another bunch of clones, and while he's taking them all out you do that fireball thing again. He wouldn't expect it, might not dodge in time, especially if some clones hold onto him. Sasuke looked at him with mild surprise. That's a good idea, actually. He looked around. The question is, where is he? He said something about Sakura, where is she? Naruto shrugged. I don't know. Easy enough to find. He focused his chakra, more difficult than usual, and formed a cross-hand sign. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A mob of clones appeared around him and immediately scattered. Naruto staggered suddenly and sat down hurriedly. All right, that might have been a little much. He shook his head muzzily. He had used quite a bit of chakra there, especially given that he hadn't gotten any of the last mob's chakra back, because Kakashi had destroyed them all. He waited a moment for his head to clear, then stood up, breathing rather more heavily than usual. Now I guess we should just wait until one of them comes back. Sasuke nodded. Hey Dobe, what is that technique? It's not a regular clone, obviously. It's called shadow clones. Physical clones that dispel after they get hit hard. It takes a boatload of chakra though. Sasuke looked at him rather bemusedly and said nothing. Naruto, still tired, felt no particular urge to continue the conversation. He looked around, seeing nothing out of the ordinary, but noticed that with the latest large expenditure of chakra the lines had grown more distinct. There were none on the ground, which was almost a pity, as it would have made it quite a bit easier to dig Sasuke out, but they covered the trees, the rocks, they were all over the bridge. Naruto closed his eyes momentarily and took a mental step back. Ignore them. Don't freak out. Then, suddenly, he shook his head and cursed. Kami, damn it, Kakashi-sensei is an asshole. Sasuke looked up. Not that I disagree, but what brought this on? He saw one of my clones and just dispelled it. Kind of painfully. He's this way, said Naruto, moving off at a jog in one direction. Sasuke followed. Did you see Sakura? He's got her in some kind of genjutsu. At least I assume that's what it is, since she's just sitting there looking horrified while Kakashi stands in front of her. Sasuke grunted as they continued on. A moment later, they crossed the boundary into the forest proper, and Naruto jumped up into the trees. Sasuke followed. After perhaps a minute they stopped. We're almost there, said Naruto. You'd best transform into me now, so we don't lose surprise. Sasuke nodded and made a quick gesture, transforming into a perfect copy of Naruto. Naruto was inclined to laugh at first, Sasuke as Naruto looked at him, and gave a very Sasuke-like supercilious look. Keep going, Dobe. Naruto suppressed his laughs as they moved again. It was only another few hundred feet to the edge of the clearing in which Sakura sat, caught in her genjutsu, while Kakashi stood in front of her maintaining it. Naruto landed in the clearing, Sasuke behind him. Hey! Sensei! I don't like being ignored. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Another mob of clones appeared, half in the clearing, half in the branches of the trees. Naruto himself fell into a squat, winded. The mob of clones, including Sasuke, charged forwards. Kakashi rolled his single visible eye and flashed at them. He began dispelling them, again, left and right, no clone able to get a shot on the bells at his waist. But unbeknownst to him, one clone in the mob was making hand signs. It happened suddenly. A flash of fire came from within the group of clones, and a huge, roaring ball of it came out to engulf Kakashi and the 6 clones he was currently engaging. All the clones immediately dispelled, but Sasuke had seen Kakashi right in their midst as the fireball destroyed them. He kept it up until he ran out of breath, and looked at the target. This one had made an actual crater. None of the clones nearby had survived. Kakashi was nowhere in sight. Instead, a blackened log fell to the ground. Sasuke cursed. Again? Seriously? The henge had dispelled when he put as much chakra as he could into the fire jutsu, leaving him again looking like himself. He looked around frantically, unable to find Kakashi. The genjutsu on Sakura had broken when Kakashi was distracted by the next iteration attack of the clones. She looked around, confused, only to focus suddenly on Sasuke's fireball. Then, seeing his henge dispel, she smiled happily, only for the emotion to turn again to alarm. There! Behind you! The voice was female. Sakura? Sasuke spun around, dodging to one side, barely avoiding a driving punch from Kakashi. Then it was himself versus Kakashi again, Sasuke barely holding out, now on the defensive. Then, suddenly, a clone of Naruto jumped out from behind Kakashi and grabbed him in an arm lock, his legs locked around Kakashi's waist. Kakashi faltered, and Sasuke lunged forwards triumphantly, grabbing for the now exposed bells, when he suddenly felt a really odd twisting motion, as if he was being yanked up into the air, but without going upwards. Then, suddenly, the feeling resolved, and he was standing in the arm lock of a Naruto clone, the clone hanging off his back. Unprepared for the sudden weight, Sasuke fell backwards, landing on the clone. Ow! Sasuke had expected it to simply dispel, but it hadn't. Its grip had slackened with the fall. Sasuke rolled off and looked at it. Naruto? Naruto lay there, rubbing at his nose. Okay, not a clone. Yeah? That hurt. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Sorry, Dobe. Kakashi-sensei did a kawarimi, again, and switched me into the hold. Naruto got up, still rubbing his nose. He addressed the white-haired jounin, who was standing right in front of them where Sasuke had been. You are really annoying, you know that? I work at it. Kakashi looked up at the sky, his voice and effect in no way indicating that he had just been exchanging blows. And time is up. Sorry, no bells for you. Meet me back at the starting position, all 3 of you. He disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sasuke stood. Damn it. He looked over at Sakura, who stood under the tree where she had been caught in Kakashi's genjutsu. Are you alright? Sakura blushed and nodded hesitantly. Naruto grumbled. Cursedly annoying sensei, let's get going. We probably failed that. Sasuke nodded and followed Naruto out of the clearing, with Sakura hurrying to catch up. Kakashi sat on the ground, reading some sort of orange-covered book. He looked up as the 3 arrived, and stowed the book somewhere behind his back. Naruto wondered vaguely what it was, but that was the least of his worries as the 3 of them stood in a line in front of the jounin. Kakashi raised his one visible eyebrow. What could be seen of his expression was sardonic. How'd you like the test? Naruto glared at him. You're annoying, sensei. Kakashi rose to his feet. Alright then. Naruto, you have a lot of chakra, but you should work on some more creative uses for it than try to beat people up with 50 clones. Sasuke, I was startled that you could do the fireball jutsu, but if I can dodge it easily it's not a good time to do it. You did better the second time. He turned to look at Sakura, whose eyes were downcast. Sakura, you did a good job of hiding at first, but you lost concentration on the task at hand. That's why I was able to catch you so easily in that genjutsu. Overall, you're decent fighters. There is definite room for improvement. Naruto looked at him. What's your point, sensei? We're just going back to the academy, right? Kakashi laughed sheepishly, one hand behind his head. Oh yeah, maybe should have said that first. Team 7 passes, you're all genin now. Naruto's jaw dropped, and he looked at Kakashi murderously. What? Then what was all that crap with the bells for? Kakashi's visible eye wrinkled in what might have been a smile under the mask. The test was whether, even in a situation that seemed to require you to compete against each other, you could still work together. Naruto, Sasuke, you did well with that, you managed to surprise me with that fireball, Sasuke. Sakura, you warned your teammate about a threat to him, even though it might have led to him getting a bell instead of you. His face and effect became deadly serious. Sometimes the rules, or the mission, seem to conflict with your teammates. Your comrades. This is the question, what do you do when you are forced to fight your comrades, or abandon them? And this is the answer, those who abandon the mission, or break the rules, are considered to be worthless. Trash. But those who abandon or betray their comrades are worse than trash. That is the lesson of this test. Naruto looked pensive for a moment, then nodded. Then, as the words sank in, a broad grin grew on his face. Hey, we graduated. Yes. Sasuke acknowledged the news with only a subtle grin, but it was a visible show of emotion that was not annoyance, which might as well have been a record. Sakura, of course, was looking at Sasuke, but she seemed happy as well. Kakashi made the eye gesture that might have indicated a grin under his mask. Team 7 will begin missions tomorrow. See you then. As Naruto walked proudly back to the village, he almost managed to ignore the fact that there were still black lines on everything he saw. Naruto burst into the mission room at the Hokage Tower, pushing close behind Kakashi. The old man sat there, in the middle of the table, Iruka-sensei beside him, both flanked by a few people Naruto didn't know. Sasuke team and Sakura followed behind him, with somewhat more dignity, but both were still visibly excited about their first mission. They lined up in a rank facing the table, Kakashi at one end. Hokage-sama, Team 7 ready for duty. The Hokage smiled slightly and picked up a sheet of paper from the tabletop in front of him. It was all Naruto could do to avoid loudly proclaiming his enthusiasm and anticipation. In pursuit of some remnant of dignity, he confined his excited ranting to his own thoughts. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. What do we get to do today? Will we get to fight someone? Wow. He almost missed the Hokage's reading off the sheet. Available missions for Team 7. Moving of heavy objects in warehouses of Tsukura. General services, including garden chores, babysitting, and grocery shopping, provided to the Shizuka family. Retrieval of the cat Tora belonging to the wife of the fire daimyo. Is there a preference? Naruto's face fell, and his fidgety demeanor shifted instantly to a crestfallen one. He opened his mouth to protest, but Sasuke, standing beside him, poked him in the ribs and preempted it. Sasuke's expression had also shifted, though less dramatically, from the almost grin he had previously worn to his usual annoyed flat effect. Kakashi, the Hokage, Iruka, and the only other person at the mission table wearing a hetai were all watching the three genin with identical expressions of dark amusement. Kakashi selected one of the mission slips from the table. The cat, I believe? That should prove a challenge. The three dismayed genin turned and followed him out of the room. Team 7 walked back into the mission room, Naruto carrying a disgruntled and beribboned cat. All three of the genin had scratch marks on their arms and faces. Kakashi, of course, was untouched. Team 7, reporting mission complete, said Kakashi, stowing the little orange book behind his back. A woman who could only be described as precisely the sort of person who would attach ribbons to a perfectly healthy cat, then repeatedly hire ninjas to recover it when it ran away, was standing by the mission table. She rushed forward and grabbed the cat from Naruto. Oh, my sweet little Tora! Mommy was so worried about you. How could you worry Mommy so? She said in an indescribably annoying, squeaky voice, hugging the cat tightly against her chest. The cat made a resigned meowing noise, fighting weakly for room to breathe. The genin, as if by previous accord, looked pointedly away. After several more such pointless eruptions, the woman paid the clerk who sat next to the Hokage at the table, and walked out with her cruelly imprisoned cat. The genin looked at Kakashi, who rubbed the back of his head and grinned. It's up to the Jounin sensei what we do in terms of missions, so, do any of you want to do another mission today? The three genin were unanimous in their immediate negative responses. All right then. You're off on your own recognizance today. Meet again here tomorrow for missions. He disappeared in a cloud of smoke, apparently taking on your own recognizance seriously. Sasuke stared at the place where he had been for a moment, then shrugged and walked out. Naruto and Sakura followed. Sakura peeled off to destinations of her own once they left the building. Naruto was about to do the same, but Sasuke beckoned him along with him. Naruto, not actually having anything else to do, followed. Sasuke was silent until they reached one of the training grounds, one nearer and then the large one where they had their bell test, but still only little frequented. Then he turned to face Naruto. Both of them began speaking at once, then broke off. Naruto gestured for Sasuke to speak first. When you told Kakashi about how last time you fought all out you didn't like what happened, what were you talking about? Naruto sighed, glancing around. Wow, it couldn't be a nice simple question, he said. Then looked up at the sky. I'm not sure how much of it I can actually tell you, some of it might be village secrets. Leaving out anything specific, I was attacked by a traitor to the village. He had reason to believe from his previous experience that I was a worthless fighter. He came at me with intent to kill. I did the shadow clone jutsu and hit him with about 100 exploding tags. Same as I did against Kakashi, except this guy didn't kawari me out of it, he just got really, really badly mangled. It was kind of ugly. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. A traitor? What was he ranked? Chunin rank. He underestimated me. I probably couldn't have gotten him that badly if he'd been cautious from the start. I got lucky. Sasuke nodded. Naruto waited a moment before asking his own question. So, when you introduced yourself, that you were going to kill a certain person, and it was in connection with your clan, did you mean who I thought you meant? Sasuke's face went bleak. I meant my older brother, yes. I see you've heard of him? Naruto nodded in return. Yeah. He paused for a long second. That's some ambition you've got there, team. It is. Sasuke's voice was flat, and he regarded the ground for a time. Then he looked up, his face losing the bleakness it had attained. I'd like to fight you. Naruto nodded. If you want. You want to set rules? Sasuke grinned. I thought at first we'd leave ninjutsu out of it. So no, pulling armies out of your back pocket, and I won't be shooting any fireballs at you. Naruto assumed a ready stance. You're probably going to win this one, then. You were always better than me at taijutsu. Sasuke dropped into his own stance. Let's see. Naruto walked back along the path from the training ground, exhilarated. Sasuke was good. Their early taijutsu matches had gone all his way, and while if he was allowed clones he could usually pull him down by force of numbers, it wasn't really a fair match. Either of them could use their potentially deadly techniques, fireballs or explosive tags. The training ground Sasuke had chosen was quite a ways out from the village. Sasuke had gone off after their match to do something insufficiently specified, but whatever it was took him away from the village proper. That left Naruto walking back along the line of training fields on his own, the sun setting behind him, bathing the scene in a ruddy light, and casting long shadows ahead of everything he saw. He saw a figure on the road ahead of him, moving more slowly than he, and as he approached he saw that it was familiar. He broke into a run. Hey, Hinata-chan, he said, coming up beside her and slowing down to her pace. She looked at him and smiled, blushing slightly, though it was difficult to see with her face in shadow. Hello, Naruto-kun. So, Hinata-chan, are you doing missions now? What's your team like? Who's your sensei? The questions came quickly, Naruto almost cutting himself off in his haste. She almost giggled at his distractible enthusiasm. We started missions yesterday. My team seems pleasant enough. Our sensei is someone named Kurinai. She's a genjutsu specialist. Naruto grinned. Cool. Hey, Hinata-chan, I was wondering if you'd like to get together tomorrow or something and work out a bit. Because I need to get faster at taijutsu, and you're the fastest person I've ever fought. And he paused, for some reason reluctant to finish, because it's fun to spend time with you. Instead, he just cut himself off. So yeah. Hinata ducked her head and blushed brighter. I guess I could do that. Naruto grinned. Thanks. How are your missions going? Hinata smiled. Well enough, I suppose it's just little jobs, like moving things around or doing chores for people. Not difficult. Naruto made a mock pout. Yeah, we had to catch this cat who's kind of nasty, and we have to avoid hurting it at all, so it just scratched the heck out of us. He glanced down at his arm, where there had been a moderately nasty claw wound, but it was gone. Huh. Anyway, we did this teamwork exercise with Kakashi yesterday, so didn't do a mission then. And I just fought Sasuke. He's, like, really good, even better than I thought seeing him in the academy. He kind of beat me up. A look of concern crossed Hinata's face, and she opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. Naruto did not notice. That's one reason why I wanted to spar with you, because you're the only person I've ever seen who's faster than he is. Naruto grinned at her. Hinata ducked down, hunching her shoulders. I hope I can help you, and Naruto-kun, she said. Naruto looked at her, hearing her sudden hesitation. Oh, it'll help a lot, Hinata-chan. I could never hit you in the academy, so I figure if I get fast enough to actually land a punch on you I'll be able to beat Sasuke team easy. Hinata gave him a tremulous smile. I hope so. He grinned. It'll be great. He looked up, noticing the sudden change in the light. The sun had set. Oh, dread, I've got to go, Hinata-chan. I wanted to meet someone, and they might leave soon. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Hinata nodded. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. Naruto grinned and ran ahead. The Hokage was filling out another sheet in the reams of paperwork that the office of Hokage required when the door opened. He looked up and saw Naruto walking into the room. Putting down his pencil, he smiled as the boy sat down. Hello, Naruto. What is it? Naruto grinned at him. No, Jizen, I was wondering something. Could you teach me that darkness trick that you used on me when I was going crazy about the lines? The Hokage raised an eyebrow. I could. Is there a reason you want to learn it? Well, Naruto paused. I was using the shadow clones a lot when Kakashi tested us yesterday, used up a bunch of chakra, and started seeing the lines again. And this time I used up more, so I didn't stop seeing them before stuff started falling apart on me. He shivered, but continued. If that's going to happen every time I use a lot of chakra, I can try to start dealing with the side effects on their own, but I'd like to be able to turn off my eyes if I need to. The Hokage nodded. Very well then. I can teach you that. You should be able to learn it pretty quickly. I'll find a time when I can teach you, perhaps later this week. Naruto grinned brightly. Thanks, Jizen. The Hokage smiled back at him. It's no problem, Naruto. Oh, and there's another thing I was going to tell you, which I might as well tell you now. Now that you're a genin, I'm giving you authorization to look at the level 3 sealing manuals. Naruto, already grinning, grinned wider, so much that the Hokage might have been afraid his head would split open. Hey! Cool! I've been wanting those. Thanks a lot, Jizen. The Hokage held up one finger. But one condition. The level 3 books have some instructions for, among other things, trap seals that can activate automatically when they sense a chakra signature nearby. You've caused enough havoc by jury-rigging hand-triggered seals. Before I let you look at the level 3 books, I want your promise that you won't use seals for any more pranks. That includes clever little traps for your sensei. All right? Naruto pouted. Ojise, and that makes it no fun. The Hokage suppressed a smile. Fun or no fun, that's the condition. There are laws against attacking people, Naruto, and using Fuinjutsu in a trap looks a whole lot more like an attack than a harmless prank. I know you don't mean it that way, but it's something that the council can say, and they don't like you already. Which means that I have to deal with a bunch of idiots loudly clamoring for your head. So no more sealed traps. Got it? Naruto hung his head. Got it. Thanks for the level 3 authorization, anyway, Jizen. The Hokage nodded. You're welcome. And your promise? Naruto rolled his eyes. I promise not to use Fuinjutsu in any pranks or traps laid for people who are not enemies to Konoha. All right? Perfectly. Thank you, Naruto. The Hokage smiled at him. Naruto grinned himself and walked out of the office. Naruto found Hinata at one of the training grounds the next day, right after their mandatory D-rank grunt work. He came up behind her and greeted her rather loudly, eliciting a jump and a squeak. Oh. Hello, Naruto-kun. I didn't see you, I'm sorry. It's no problem, Hinata-chan. I was, kind of trying to surprise you. I shouldn't have been surprised, she mumbled as they walked over to the sparring ground. Naruto did not seem to hear her. Instead, they took up positions across from each other on one set of starting lines, and both bowed. Naruto took what seemed to be the usual academy position, while Hinata, for the first time in sparring with him, stood in the Jukin stance, activating her eyes as she did so. Naruto looked at her quizzically for a moment. Hinata-chan, what's that stance? I've never seen it before. She blushed, but did not break her stance to look away. This is the Jukin stance, it's for the Hyuga Taijutsu style, it's against the rules for me to use it in the academy, so people won't know too much about it, but I can use it now. Naruto grinned. Hey, cool, Jukin. Let's see. Without further discussion, he launched into one of the standard academy attack flows, aiming a straight punch at her face while prepared to follow up quickly after a block. Hinata, from her lower stance, brought one hand around in what looked like an oddly reversed standard block. However, her palm hitting his wrist, she pushed a small spike of chakra into it as she slapped it aside. Naruto quickly took a step back, shaking his hand. Wow. That's neat. I guess, he said, moving his hand around and individually flexing his fingers, that's a weak version of the chakra. He waved his hands around vaguely. Thing? 'Cause I read in the archive that Jukin strikes should more or less paralyze what they hit, and that was only a little bit worse than hitting my elbow wrong. Hinata nodded, returning to her ready stance. Yes, if I push too much chakra, it can do permanent damage, so when we spar it's just minor strikes. Is that a problem? No. No problem. I like having the use of my limbs. Naruto shot her a grin. Then he attacked again, this time feinting into a kick. She blocked, spiking his calf this time. He pulled back, massaging his leg, then advanced again. This time, instead of feinting, or drawing back from the painful spikes, he swung twice, then simply jumped at her, leading with one shoulder. She was bowled off her feet, and they both ended up on the ground in a tangle of limbs. Naruto began to laugh. He took a moment to disentangle himself, then rolled off of her, pushing himself up, a little harder with the blows he had taken to the arms and setting up his tackle. Well, that's one way to get through that defense of yours. Hinata had been blushing vigorously throughout, but here she giggled slightly and met his eyes. Ano, it would not be good to do that in a fight. If someone was trying to kill you, they could have hit you in the back there. Naruto grinned. Figures. Ah, well, I'll figure something out. They sparred for some hours. By the end of it, Hinata was tired and pouring sweat. Naruto breathed heavily for a few moments after each exchange, longer if she happened to have hit his lungs that time, but recovered quickly. When they finished, he was red-faced but seemed no less energetic than when they began. She stood back from the line, seeing the sun set. Ano, I have to go. I'm sorry, she said, looking down. He grinned. No problem. You're really good, you know. That Jukin is great. You could beat Sasuke team easy. She smiled at him as she left, but she did not say what she was thinking, that with the Jukin, what he had described was no real achievement, and for a Hyuga, she was weak. So it went. Team 7 routinely did D-rank missions in the morning. Some were boring and routine, such as, apparently every other day, finding the fire daimyo's wife's cat. Others were more interesting. One day, they were called to clear a field of the tall, scrubby weeds that had grown on it. Sasuke had immediately sought permission from Kakashi to use fireballs on it, and on gaining it had taken great pleasure in scouring the entire area clean. That was one of their quicker missions. Several days after the Hokage had taught him the Kokwanjo no Jutsu, the darkness genjutsu that Naruto could use to turn off his eyes if he needed to, he sat in a training area, ready to try something. First, he created a mob of shadow clones. This time, instead of using them in concert to attack another, he simply had them all fight to the, dispersion, joining in fully himself. After some minutes of bright orange cacophony, the field was empty again, and Naruto was panting and bruised. Then, allowing himself no more than 30 seconds rest time, he did it again. Then again. It took 5 iterations of this before he was feeling as exhausted as he had after Kakashi's bell test, and that surprised him. I only made 3 mobs of that size when I fought Kakashi, and I was just about falling down. Am I getting stronger? Thin lines had manifested faintly on the surfaces of things after the 4th try, but after the 5th they were again dark and omnipresent, ominous in their potential. Naruto shivered slightly on seeing them, but suppressed the reaction and sat under a tree. He closed his eyes and shouted in his mind. Hey! Idiot fox! You want to tell me some things? And a voice sounded in his mind, greater than his own, darkly amused. Your wish is my command, whelp. And he felt his consciousness slipping away, and he fell over and slept. He woke in a dimly lit hallway, water on the ground. He was lying face down, but the water was only a fraction of an inch deep. It did not reach his mouth or nose, merely making him rather wet. As he stood, he looked around. A hole in the ceiling emitted oddly yellow light. There were cross passages every few feet, and the ceiling was covered in pipes whose purpose was not clear. A loud rumbling noise came from one direction, and a breath of air washed over him, smelling not quite foul, but fetid and odd. Where the hell am I? I was just trying to speak to the fox, and I wind up here? He looked around again. He had no idea where he was or where he should go, but the direction of that odd wind seemed as good as any. That at least implied that there was something at the end. He set off, down the main hallway, 3 passages down, and then turned. This side passage went on straight for only some tens of feet, then ended. It left him in a huge, high-ceilinged room whose floor was still covered in water. A huge gate, stretching across most of one wall and all the way from the floor to the ceiling, stood before him. Its 2 sides were, oddly enough, joined only by a piece of paper with the word seal written on it, as it would be used for certain types of prison seal that were only discussed in the abstract in any sources he had read. He approached the gate, it being the most interesting thing he had seen here so far. As he walked toward it, he felt another rush of air over him, stronger, this time, and stronger smelling. It accompanied a repetition of the earlier rumbling, but this time, he could hear it better, and identified it as something very large, breathing. He froze, only then putting the pieces together, just as a huge pair of eyes appeared behind the gate over a wide, toothy grin. As he watched, the whole of it became shrouded in red fire, which burned heatlessly as it spoke. Hello, whelp. You wanted to see me? The words were laced with poisonous laughter. Naruto looked at it, frozen, and tried desperately to collect himself. You're the fox. There was a sound of laughter this time, but its humor was dark. Astute of you to have noticed. Naruto drew himself up, his annoyance warring with his fear. Hey! I have some questions for you. Ask and you shall receive, whelp. Naruto stuttered, suddenly off balance, then spoke again. What's with all these lines? Have I not already given you this answer? The lines are death. If you cut a thing along its lines, it will be cut. If you stab a thing in its points, it will be destroyed. All right, but why am I seeing them? You see with my eyes, whelp. As I am trapped here, my power affects you. Naruto frowned. All right, wait, points? What are those? The fox laughed again. You do not see them? Simply wait, whelp. Naruto shook his head, confused, then tried again. Why does it drive me crazy after a while? You think a human can see with a demon's eyes and suffer no ill effects? Be glad that you can use it for the little time you can, whelp. This time there was a long, dark laugh, sounding more truly amused at this than at anything before. The fox's laugh was frightening. Naruto stood up straight and attempted to shrug the effect off, but his voice was less brash. That's great, now where am I and how do I get out? The fox laughed again. Oh, I will send you away, whelp. But hear this. You will require power or else you will die. My presence within you thrusts you onto a greater stage. Merely always know that without me you would be helpless. And again consciousness slipped away, and again he slept. Sakura debated with herself whether to proceed. She had decided to approach Kakashi after their mission that day, but now she was less sure of herself. For one thing, he had simply gone to an empty training ground after their mission and sat, reading a book with a bright orange cover. While this was convenient for her, it was most certainly not part of his daily routine. Had he anticipated her request that day? If so, it was accommodating of him to act so obligingly, but a little bit creepy that he could read her so well. She eventually realized that to avoid it would be futile. He had to be aware of her presence, simply standing lamely in the street near the training ground. If she left, he would simply know that she didn't have the courage to approach him, and how pathetic was that? Sasuke-kun. Need to get stronger. Just think about that. With that, she stepped onto the training ground and walked toward him. He looked up at her when she approached, and stowed the book behind his back. How was he storing all that? Whenever he got anything out, he just pulled it from behind him, as if someone was obligingly hiding in his kunai pouch and handing him things. Weird. Kakashi-sensei? Yes, Sakura? Sensei, I was wondering what can you show me to make me stronger? Well, that depends. What are you good at? If I recall correctly, your score's weak taijutsu, moderate chakra capacity, good chakra control. Is that right? She nodded hesitantly. Well, if you're good at chakra control, the things that immediately present themselves are genjutsu and medical training. Medic training usually waits until you're at Chunin, but genjutsu I can show you some genjutsu. Also, if you increase your capacity some, you can do some interesting things with standard jutsu. That'll just be training. She nodded again, somewhat more confidently. Genjutsu then? He stood up. Let's begin. Naruto stood across from Sasuke at the training ground, a now familiar position. His afternoons after missions were basically evenly split between sparring with Sasuke and sparring with Hinata. The latter had made him significantly faster, requiring that he fully dodge blows due to the impossibility of conventionally blocking a Juken strike. While the former had, well, increased his tolerance for sarcasm. This was the third fight of the day. The first two had been plain taijutsu, and as usual, Sasuke had won both, though that was getting to take longer and longer. Now Naruto grinned, because he was able now to use shadow clones. He formed a crossed hand seal and focused his chakra, this time eschewing the voice repetition of the technique. A dozen clones formed around him, including him in the mob. They all charged in unison with a yell. Sasuke held his ground. He was used to this by now. The first clone reached him, and he dispelled it with a single punch. The second, likewise, though this one got in a blow to his shoulder first. The third one was Naruto himself. He took a punch to the face, which hurt, and Sasuke turned away, thinking he was a clone who would dispel. This proved a mistake. Naruto jumped on him from behind, grabbing him in a full Nelson like he had Kakashi during the bell test. Sasuke, unfortunately, was not so adept with his kawarimi as Kakashi was, and Naruto's grip prevented him from using hand seals. Sasuke took 3 blows to the face before he could dispel the attacking clone with a kick. Then he jumped up and backwards, landing hard on his back, or rather on Naruto. Naruto yelped, his grip broken, and Sasuke scrambled up to deal with the rest of the clones. They were charging as Sasuke finished his hand seals. They were all but one caught in his fireball, a weakened version that would dispel clones but not severely injure Naruto himself. The remaining clone, who had been a few steps behind the others, charged through the smoke of their demise and jumped at Sasuke, yelling. Sasuke, who had paused for a moment to breathe after the chakra-intensive fireball technique, caught the first kick and threw an uncharacteristically sloppy counterpunch. The clone ducked under it and slammed a fist into the Uchiha's stomach. Sasuke folded around the blow, but retained the presence of mind to slam a vicious headbutt into the clone's own head, dispelling it. He straightened up slowly, one arm across his solar plexus, and saw Naruto, now standing, jump up. He looked up, tracking Naruto's motion, and caught the first downward kick on his other, upraised arm. Naruto, moving as if in slow motion, pulled his legs up as the support of Sasuke's arm failed, and, as he fell, brought one knee up into the other genin's face. He pulled the blow at the last moment, but there was still a startling crack. Naruto landed and jumped backwards, but Sasuke held up one hand in token of surrender as he pressed the other to his nose. As he removed it, Naruto saw his nose bent to one side, a trickle of blood running down. He winced. That looks nasty. You alright, team? Sasuke nodded, not speaking. He took one deep breath through his mouth, Naruto saw, and moved his nose slowly back straight. To his credit, he remained silent throughout, though he clenched his teeth. He took a moment before speaking again, his voice oddly nasal. Nicely done, Dobe. Naruto grinned. You gonna have that looked at? Sasuke nodded. I guess so. Can't really fight like this, anyway. They walked off the field side by side, Naruto feeling a little bit smug about duplicating on the perpetually arrogant Uchiha the same sorts of wounds that he had taken in their taijutsu-only matches. Team 7 was, for a change of pace, looking for the Fire Daimyo's wife's cat. Again. Naruto had started using large numbers of clones to search for the drat beast, but a clone couldn't reliably catch the thing. It was vicious enough in its scratching that it could dispel a clone, and the attempt at capture would only stir it up. It was more useful to have them all search than any that saw it dispel to send the information back to him. Naruto still couldn't believe that he hadn't noticed that he received his shadow clone's memories until it was pointed out to him by the Uchiha. Even when he was beating him in a fight, Sasuke still managed to make him feel stupid. He received a burst of memory, and sorted through it. There was the cat, and the clone had been there. Closer than usual to the tower. Perhaps the cat wanted to sample the leavings from village market stalls, rather than the available small wildlife in the wooded areas. He signaled his team, and they moved quickly in the direction of the cat. This is simply riveting, said Sasuke, his nose only now free of the tape it had borne for the past week, as they closed in on the feline. Naruto nodded in annoyed agreement. After a quick interlude involving some loud hissing, painful scratches and a face full of fur, the two continued their conversation on the way back to the tower with a cat now wrapped in a sack. I wonder if the C-rank missions are less pointless? Naruto sighed. I figure we can at least ask for one. It's been, what, a month? 30 of these things is more than enough for me. Sasuke looked at him with a raised eyebrow. Tomorrow, then? Naruto nodded as Sakura caught up to them. Tomorrow. Team 7 walked into the mission room, a scene that had already become very familiar. The Hokage sat at the table alongside Iruka, just as they had every day. It might have been the first day they had done it, or their fifth, or any of the other days. Nothing about this room ever changed. Naruto and Sasuke had spoken to Kakashi about receiving a C-rank mission. His reply had been entirely non-committal and unhelpful, which was pretty much standard for Kakashi. Naruto was sufficiently annoyed that he was ready to take it to the next level. The Hokage was reading off the available D-rank missions again. He finished the listing of tasks, and Kakashi was ready to select one, when Naruto spoke. Hey, Ojaizen. Those missions are all boring. Can we get a C-rank instead? Naruto had, in fact, heard of the concepts of dignity and proper respect. Indeed, he respected the Hokage probably most of all the people he knew. No one had managed to explain to him that such respect was usually expressed through formal means of address. Amusement and annoyance warred in the Hokage's mind over the rights to his facial expression, and he ruthlessly suppressed both. A request is logged from Uzumaki Naruto to assign Team 7 a C-rank mission. Is this the desire of Team 7? Sasuke spoke first. It is my desire. Sakura nodded a moment afterwards, following Sasuke's lead. Does the leader of Team 7 object? The Hokage looked at Kakashi, who was standing in proper formation, but with a particular unfocused look in his visible eye. Kakashi started, then rubbed the back of his head almost sheepishly. Well, if they want one, I don't have a problem. Kakashi looked at the genin, who looked back at him with expressions of eagerness, Naruto, slightly less apathy than usual, Sasuke, and mild nervousness, Sakura. He nodded. Yeah, I guess that's fine. The Hokage nodded. Very well. C-rank mission assigned to Team 7. He selected a different stack of papers from the table in front of him. The mission is, he pulled a slip from the stack and read from it, to escort a civilian client to the Land of Waves, then remain there until the completion of a project, while protecting him and his associates from whatever dangers appear. Client is a bridge builder working on a bridge connecting the Land of Waves to the Land of Fire. Mission expected to last up to 3 months. Anticipated hazards include risk of banditry and wild animal attacks. He turned to the side, where a door was set in the wall with a chunin guarding it. Please bring in the client. The chunin nodded sharply and walked through the sliding door. A moment later he returned, followed by an old man. He wore an oddly shaped straw hat, and he held a bottle in one hand. The flush on his face implied that the contents of the bottle were rather strongly alcoholic. Tazuna-san, your mission has been assigned to Team 7, said the Hokage, indicating them. The old man looked at them olishly, his face red. These are just a bunch of kids. How can they be ninjas? He said with a scowl. Naruto crossed his arms and looked at Tazuna with a glower. Sasuke's almost smile slid off his face. Especially that one. Tazuna pointed. His hand was too unsteady to tell who he was pointing at, but his next words left no doubt. The short one with the stupid coat. You're too short to be a ninja. He obviously found this hilarious. Naruto yelped in indignation and moved as if to charge at Tazuna. He was caught short by two hands. Kakashi grabbed the back of his coat, and Sasuke caught his wrist. Sasuke spoke out of the side of his mouth. Dobe, if you kill the client we can't get paid for protecting him. Naruto grumped and stepped back. Kakashi and Sasuke released him. Kakashi stepped forwards. Tazuna-san, I assure you that we are indeed ninjas. My team are genin, and they are certainly trained more than well enough to defeat any sort of bandits or animals that we might encounter. I am a jounin, and I am competent to handle any realistic threat. Tazuna took another pull at his bottle and humphed. I guess I get what I pay for. Alright, when do we leave? Kakashi glanced at his team. Does anyone anticipate preparation taking longer than a few hours? All three genin shook their heads. Then we can leave this afternoon. Tazuna-san, please meet us at the east gate at 3 o'clock. Our mission begins then. He turned to look at the three genin. Dismissed. Hinata was working on repairing a roof when she saw Naruto at a distance. She looked at him with a smile, seeing him grin in response, then burst into a cloud of smoke and disappear. What? She looked around, concerned. Her teammates, working beside her, looked up. Hinata-san, is something wrong? Inquired Shino. No. No, I just saw something odd, she said, and began to work again. Some 5 minutes later, she was taking a break. She had just stepped down off the ladder onto the ground when Naruto, again, came up to her. Hey, Hinata-chan. She smiled, still a little perturbed. Hello, Naruto-kun. I know just a few minutes ago, were you on that roof over there? She indicated the roof of the building on which Naruto had been. Oh yeah? Yeah, that was a clone. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you, our team got a C-rank mission. Hokage Ojizen said that it might take like 3 months or something. So I'll probably be gone for a while, and I just wanted to say goodbye. She nodded to him, smiling. Congratulations, Naruto-kun. I hope it goes well. He grinned. Thanks. Well, I'll see you around, I guess. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. He waved and ran off. Hinata smiled after him, wondering. He would be gone, maybe for a long time, and what was that about a clone? Clones didn't do that. Naruto arrived at the meeting place perhaps 5 minutes late. Sasuke and Sakura were already standing at the edge of the square fronting the east gateway. More surprisingly, so was Kakashi. Naruto walked up to them and burst out at Kakashi, Hey! Since when are you ever on time? Why is the one time you're on time the day I'm late? What's with that? Kakashi smiled under his mask, his eye reflecting the expression. Why, Naruto, I don't know what you're talking about. When have you ever known me to be less than perfectly punctual? He looked down the road. Hey, there's Tazuna-san. He walked towards the bridge builder, leaving Naruto fuming in his wake. Sasuke glanced at Naruto askance. Hey Dobe, you packed for 3 months there? Sure enough, both Sasuke and Sakura were wearing large, heavy-looking travel packs, while Naruto wore only his usual training attire and weapon holsters, plus an extra, odd-looking pouch on each hip. Naruto glanced down. Oh. Yeah, I am. Storage seals? He grinned beatifically. It makes things so much lighter, it's nice and convenient. This with a smug look at Sasuke's overlarge pack. Sasuke snorted. Phew and Dobe. Kakashi walked up alongside Tazuna, cutting the conversation short. Alright kids, let's go, he said, louder than usual. The genin glanced at each other, confused at the unaccustomed diminutive, until Sasuke raised one eyebrow and subtly indicated Tazuna, who was looking chagrined. A sense of understanding permeated Team 7. Ah, he's messing with the client. They filed one by one out the small inset door in the large gate, Kakashi first, followed by Tazuna and the genin. Kakashi stopped at the booth in which sat the guarding chunin. Team 7, departing for C-ranked mission assigned by the Hokage, he said, handing a scroll to the guard. The chunin looked bored, stamping it and handing it back. Team 7 mission confirmed, he said. Kakashi continued on, and Tazuna and the 3 genin followed. They camped that night near a quick-flowing stream, about half a mile off the road. Kakashi had chosen the spot for its access to water, despite Naruto's noting that he was carrying at least a week's water in one of his several storage scrolls. That conversation had been rather amusing. Naruto, this is a useful thing to know, how to support yourself on what you can carry, without using storage seals. Most ninja are not going to be carrying 50,000 ryo worth of storage scrolls on every mission they go on. 50,000 ryo? Yes, Naruto. Storage scrolls are expensive. I'm assuming you made these? Yeah, but I didn't know. Not surprising. We will be selecting our campsites according to the usual needs of ninja who do not carry small fortunes in Fuinjutsu on their persons. If Naruto had had any further objections, he had not expressed them, probably still trying to come to terms with the real value of his work. Team 7, along with Tazuna, sat around a small fire, made by Sakura under Kakashi's careful eye to release as little smoke as possible, eating field rations. The sun was just setting behind the trees to the west, as the genin wore identical distasteful expressions at the offensively bland rations. Naruto finished first and stood up. I'm going to go walk around a little. Kakashi looked up. Standard rule, stay within 50 feet of camp if you don't have good reason to leave that radius. Naruto looked slightly crestfallen, but nodded before he walked away. He turned around on reaching the 50-foot mark, and walked back across the allowed circle, turning slightly to avoid cutting through the camp. On reaching the 50-foot boundary again, he turned and paced in circles around it, restless. Meanwhile, the rest of the ninja were finishing their food. Naruto walked back up to the camp just as Sasuke was finishing. He looked up amusedly. Do you think you got enough exercise in your walk? Naruto grumped and sat down again. Soon darkness fell, and Tazuna retired to an extra tent. Kakashi stood up, stretching. All right, my shiny genin, here's your next lesson, how to establish a watch schedule in potentially hostile territory. Of course, since it wouldn't be a lesson otherwise, I regretfully cannot help you, and as such I'm going to sleep now. Good night. He disappeared as well into his tent. The three genin looked at each other until Naruto spoke. That was a lesson? Team 7 woke with the sun, except for Sasuke, who had taken the dawn watch. They ate a quick breakfast, consisting of more ration bars, while Tazuna slept. After the team was ready, Kakashi woke Tazuna and they tore down the tents. Kakashi admonished them to leave no trace of their presence behind, lest enemies determine their location. In pursuit of same, the genin combed the campsite for almost half an hour, policing the tiniest signs of their camp. Kakashi, of course, did nothing throughout. They began walking again with Kakashi cheerful and the genin more and more annoyed. Kakashi-sensei, is you having a team an opportunity for you to teach us or for you to get us to do all your work? Naruto grumbled as they left the campsite behind. Kakashi made the expression they had learned to recognize was a grin under the mask. But Naruto, if I did it all for you, you wouldn't learn anything. I'm just trying to make you the best shinobi you can be. Naruto and Sasuke both rolled their eyes at this, and Sakura made an annoyed snort. The travelers were walking along a wide dirt track between occasional, sparse clumps of trees, first Naruto and Sasuke, then Tazuna and Sakura, and finally Kakashi in the rear. They walked mostly in silence, the shinobi watching the surroundings, Tazuna simply walking. The genin in the lead passed the puddle without notice or comment. Sakura, who was watching Tazuna, did so as well. Kakashi, playing rearguard, raised one eyebrow as he passed, then simply continued walking. Naruto first became aware of the enemies at a loud splashing noise and a sound almost like the chains that controlled the large gates at Konoha on their pulleys. He spun quickly around, Sasuke following suit, to see two apparitions in gas masks and wearing out armored claws on their wrists. As he watched, a chain of odd links connected their clawed gauntlets, and it flew through the air to wrap several times around Kakashi. With a mutual yank, the two odd ninjas tightened the chain, and it ripped through Kakashi's body. Dismembered pieces fell to the ground. First one, said one of the two ninjas flatly. They charged, straight past Sakura and Tazuna towards Naruto and Sasuke. The chain leapt into the air again, seeming to have a life of its own, seeking to wrap around the two genin at the same time. Naruto and Sasuke jumped in opposite directions. While still in the air, Sasuke threw a kunai at the chain, hitting it precisely and binding it to the tree trunk behind. Not for the first time, Naruto envied Sasuke's ability with the throwing weapons. Not so confident in himself, he landed before pulling two explosive kunai from the pouch behind him. The armored ninjas, who Naruto noticed, were wearing headbands, though he could not identify the symbol at the moment, had just turned and noticed the binding of their chain when the kunai landed at their feet, tags wrapped around the handles and glowing ominously. They both ran, but the necessity of moving quickly prevented them from disengaging the chain from their gauntlets. Both enemies were still bound to the tree by their chain when the tags exploded. As the dust cleared, Sasuke charged through the cloud and attacked one of the two, jumping up to slam into him in a flying kick that left the ninja on his back, Sasuke standing on his shoulders. The genin landed a hard blow on the ninja's face above the mask, but was then forced to jump away and disengage to avoid the counterstroke of the armored claw. The other attacker had disengaged from his chain while Naruto watched Sasuke. He stood up from where he had fallen in his rush to escape the exploding tag, and turned slowly to look at Naruto with a menacing expression. The attempt at intimidation failed. Naruto formed a cross-hand seal and muttered under his breath, and 10 more of him popped into existence on either side. The clones charged, Naruto among them. The enemy's eyes widened, and he raised his clawed gauntlet in gesture of defiance, then fell over suddenly, unconscious. Naruto stopped, confused, then saw something he had not expected: Kakashi, standing behind the fallen enemy, having slammed the ring of a kunai into his temple. The Jonin nodded at Naruto before moving towards Sasuke and the other enemy. Naruto stared at the place where Kakashi had apparently fallen to the spike chain, and saw only a sliced-up log. He smacked himself in the forehead in realization and ran towards the others as well. The other enemy was down, by this point, and Kakashi stood next to Sasuke behind him. Kakashi smiled at Naruto as he ran up. "Ah, good timing, Naruto. Would you happen to have any rope or wire in those scrolls of yours?" Naruto gaped for a moment before he regained his mental balance. Yeah, 1 second. He pulled a scroll from one of his side holsters, glanced at its label, then put it back and grabbed another. This one, he opened to a certain seal, then triggered with one hand. 2 coils of ninja wire appeared atop the scroll. He handed one to Kakashi, and sealed the other one back away. As Naruto stowed his scroll, Kakashi dragged both unconscious ninja to the foot of the tree where their chain was pinned, then tied them up tightly with the wire. Naruto looked up as he finished, to see Kakashi pull a book from the pouch behind him. Unusually enough, this book was not, in fact, bright orange. He opened it up and scanned through it, as if looking for something. Naruto took the time to look more closely at the 2 enemies. Their forehead protectors bore hidden mist insignia, but he could not deduce much else from their gear. Kakashi finished with the book and put it back in his belt pouch, which was apparently bigger on the inside. He glanced down at the 2, who were just starting to wake. Kakashi sped the process up by kneeling in front of them and slapping them both vigorously across the face. When both were marginally lucid, he stood up. "The demon brothers, I see. Missing Nin of Kirigakure. What brings you here attacking random travelers?" A voice sounded in Naruto's head, still impressive and intimidating, but this time annoyed and insulted rather than amused. "Demon? They're no demons. What business have they with the name?" Naruto flinched slightly, but attempted to maintain his concentration on Kakashi. Sasuke seemed to be thinking along similar lines. "Demon brothers? The image I associate with demon is hardly a couple of pathetic assassins with a gimmicky weapon." Kakashi spoke dryly. "Nonetheless, that's their apparent alias. Care to answer my question?" This was directed at the brothers in question, along with a threatening eyebrow. One of the brothers spoke up. "We got told by," and he looked nervously at his partner, "we got hired to take out the old guy." Tazuna and Sakura had walked over by now. Sakura was looking frightened, but also a little disappointed. She was shooting more glances than usual at Sasuke, who was unaware, his attention on the captives. Tazuna had come up just in time to hear the Mist Ninja's admission, and he was looking rather pale. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "You're hiding something." His voice was almost disappointed. Told by whom?" The brother who had spoken looked panicked. "We got hired. We can't tell you, we can't. Whatever would happen to you is going to be the least of your worries." Kakashi shook his head. "Lucky you, we don't have time right now to arrange a proper interrogation. Unlucky you, that means the ANBU get to take you back to Ibiki." He ran a finger along the edge of the brothers' fighting chain, then made seals. "Kuchios no Jutsu." He slapped a hand down on the dirt path. There was a cloud of smoke, and suddenly there sat a small pug dog. "Hello, Kakashi? What is it now?" Naruto looked back and forth between the dog and the Jonin. "Sensei? Is the dog talking?" Kakashi looked at Naruto, rolling his visible eye. "Yes, Naruto. No time for introductions now. Hello, Pakin." The dog nodded. "You needed me for something?" "We're on a mission, and something came up. Message for the Hokage. 2 prisoners captured by Team 7, a day's walk out on the southeast road. Team 7 is inadequately prepared to deal with them. Suggest immediate pickup by ANBU for conveyance to Konoha. Message ends." Pakin nodded. "Got it. Anything else?" Kakashi shook his head. "No, that's it. Thanks, Pakin." "No problem." The dog leapt for the trees, jumping between them several times faster than the ninjas had been walking, and was soon gone. "Now let's see," said Kakashi. "We have a couple of missing Nin, fairly pathetic missing Nin, it's true, but missing Nin nonetheless, coming after Tazuna here." He looked straight at the old man, who turned even paler and glanced around as if to escape. "You told us that the mission was to guard you from bandits, Tazuna-san. Missing Nin of Kirigakure were not in the picture." Tazuna gulped. "Ah well," he trailed off. Kakashi nodded. "So you do know something. Very well. Kindly do tell us everything you know about who's after you, Tazuna, or else we will be unable to properly perform our duty." This might have sounded like an innocuous statement of fact in another context. As Kakashi said it, it did not. Team 7 stood around Tazuna as he finished his story. Their reactions were mixed. Naruto was pensive and quiet, for a change, while Sakura looked frightened. Sasuke did not appear to have reacted, and Kakashi's expression was invisible. Kakashi spoke first. It appears that this Gata person is hiring shinobi to go after you then. He stared at the bridge builder. That makes this at least a B-rank mission, or higher, depending on who's hired. Not at all the kind of thing that a genin team would be sent on. Tazuna ducked his head. I'm sorry, but we couldn't afford any higher-ranked missions, and I need to finish the bridge. Otherwise. Kakashi nodded. Yes, Gata retains control of the Land of Waves, reduces it to his personal fiefdom. Certainly terrible enough, and I understand your motives. The fact remains that this mission is higher level than we are really equipped to handle. Sasuke spoke up, his face impassive. We should continue. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Care to elaborate, Sasuke? It would ill reflect Konoha that we would end a mission in progress simply due to increased difficulties. Kakashi inclined his head at Sasuke. And if I'm not mistaken, it would ill reflect the Uchiha that a clan member, the last clan member, would end his first mission outside the village. Not that I blame him, I suppose he spoke again. Any other thoughts? Naruto's face cleared, and he spoke with something approaching his usual exuberance. We should keep going. I mean, it looks like this guy really needs it, and he can't pay for a higher-ranked mission. And it's just not good, like this Gata guy, you know? He shouldn't do that. Kakashi looked at the genin again. Sasuke's expression was his usual half-glower, but it was set in lines that spoke less of anger and more of determination. Naruto was looking stubborn, as usual. Sakura, well, it appeared that Sakura was frightened. But then, it wouldn't do her any good to turn back on a mission that became too hard. That's not always an option. He nodded. Is that your opinion then? Sasuke and Naruto both nodded, and, a second later, so did Sakura. Interesting. He looked back at Tazuna. It appears, then, that we're keeping the mission. However, some more precautions are necessary. He was about to continue when Naruto spoke up. Sensei? I was thinking, like maybe I could make shadow clones to go ahead of us and see if anyone tries that again. Kakashi looked at him, startled. He wouldn't have expected that sort of idea from Naruto, but then. That's a good idea, Naruto. In fact, how about I show you how to do proper sentry formation around a moving target? Naruto grinned and made a hand sign. The area around them disappeared, first in smoke, then in copies of Naruto. Kakashi sighed. Naruto, first, we only need about 10 to do sentry work. Second, for stealthy sentry formation in a forest, he indicated the green treetops around them, you may want to have your clones wear something other than orange. The travelers sat in a small boat, simple and well used. An outboard engine sat at the back of the boat, but it was not running. Instead, a nervous boatman sculled with an oar over the stern. Naruto had dismissed his sentry clones when they boarded the boat, leaving him feeling oddly exposed. 3 days of constantly having sentry clones out had gotten him used to some general knowledge of their surroundings. Everyone in the boat was quiet. The owner, who Tazuna had gotten to agree to this with a minor bribe and an appeal to patriotism, was obviously frightened. Tazuna was less so, but still nervous. Sasuke was always quiet, Sakura was following his example, and Naruto was sorting through the memories from his many sentry clones. Most of them had simply run through the trees until their shift was up, but still, you saw so much more of the country this way. The boatman spoke up softly. Look up ahead, there's the bridge. Sure enough, an enormous bridge stretched from far away to a point some half a mile ahead, barely visible in the mist. It cut off suddenly, ending without ceremony, as if it had been sliced off in the middle of the ocean. Wow, Naruto whispered, trying to keep his voice down. That's big, Tazuna-san, did you really build that? Tazuna smiled. Well, I designed it. Obviously, I didn't build it myself. And I'm still working on it. Naruto grinned at him. It's really cool. I'm glad you think so. Tazuna chuckled at the blonde boy's enthusiasm. Tried to keep it down, said the boatman frantically. If we get seen. Naruto nodded and quieted. The boat slid silently along the line of the bridge, making Naruto feel tiny next to it. After some time, the vessel turned to the side and moved through one of the tunnel-like gaps between the bridge supports. As they left the tunnel, they found themselves in a bay between 2 spurs of land, both lined with small docks. The boatman slid up alongside one. Here you are. This is as far as I go. Tazuna nodded. Thanks very much. He stepped creakily out of the boat and stretched. Now to my house. It's just a little way, that way. He indicated one of the roads leading away from the thin strip of town around the bay. The travelers set off again. As soon as they had left the town and were once again among the trees, Naruto formed a cross-hand seal and made another group of clones. These hinged themselves out of Naruto's orange jumpsuit into more inconspicuous garb, then jumped away into the trees. Tazuna, who had seen this once an hour for the past 3 days, did not blink. They had been walking for perhaps 3 hours when Naruto blinked, then turned to Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei? Something just happened to one of my clones. It didn't see anything, just got dispelled without warning. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. You're sure it didn't trip, or something? Naruto crossed his arms. Come on, Kakashi-sensei, I'm not that clumsy. Kakashi laughed. True enough. His face became serious. In that case, someone killed it. And they're probably coming after us now. Naruto, send out some clones to investigate. Everyone, defensive formation. Naruto nodded and made the cross again. These clones did not bother to disguise themselves, but simply jumped straight away. The 4 shinobi stood close around Tazuna, still moving, but alert and ready to defend. This had been the state of affairs for a minute or so when Naruto received a memory dump. Kakashi-sensei, the clones I sent out didn't find anything. One of them just dispelled themselves to report back. They saw nothing. Then, suddenly, his eyes widened. Sensei! Kakashi was not listening. He had heard something else. Everyone down! He roared suddenly, dropping to the ground. The 3 genin did the same, Sasuke grabbing Tazuna and bringing him down as well. A huge sword spun out of the forest behind them and whipped less than a foot above their heads, passing over them and slamming into a nearby tree blade first. It embedded itself in the trunk with nearly half of its width, almost cutting the tree in two. As the travelers stood again, a man wearing no shirt, only a leather strap for a sword, appeared on the sword hilt, standing above them. Kakashi looked up, taking in the sword, the man, and the headband he wore to one side of his head, the same as the demon brothers' headbands from earlier, the village hidden in the mist, as Naruto recalled. Ah. You would be Momochi Zabuza, of Kirigakure. I assume you are the person who the demon brothers attempted rather ineptly to conceal the existence of. The man, Zabuza, laughed. They spoke? I am not surprised. He finally turned fully around. I see why they failed. Sharingan no Kakashi, I wonder why you are here. He gestured at the genin now surrounding Tazuna. They would explain it. Of course Konoha would place a shinobi like yourself in charge of a team of brats. And no doubt someone thought this mission a good introduction to him? A good first test, a good, easy beginning? He laughed. Just your bad luck, brats, that it was not. Kakashi shook his head slowly. The demon of the bloody mist. Have you fallen so far, to be taking on assassinations of poor civilians for a master like Gato? I remember when you had principles. Absurdly bloody ones, true, but principles nonetheless. The Kyuubi snorted in Naruto's mind. This one also calls himself demon. I suppose he is more deserving of the title than the others. Naruto firmly shut it out. Zabuza narrowed his eyes, oblivious to the demon fox's disapproval. Gato is rich. He is willing to pay me much money to kill the old man there. I need money. But Gato is nothing but worthless. With a motion too fast to see, he yanked the sword out of the tree and dropped to the ground ahead of them. Naruto looked on, confused. Wait. How did he pull out the sword he was standing on? Zabuza stood with the huge sword across his back, directly between the team and the river across the trail ahead. I am directed to kill the old man behind you. Will you deliver him, or must I destroy you? Kakashi placed one hand on his headband, confusing Naruto. You think you can? Zabuza laughed. You might even be able to kill me, Sharingan no Kakashi. But I don't think that you can prevent me from killing the old man and all 3 of your brats. Kakashi tensed up, then, slowly, almost deliberately, he lifted the headband up, uncovering both eyes for the first time Naruto had ever seen. His eye had a long vertical scar over it, continuing over his eyelid, which suddenly opened. His eye was red, that was all Naruto could see, red, with odd black irregularities. Zabuza laughed. I am honored. The Sharingan already we'll have to see. Naruto was confused, but glancing to the side he saw that Sasuke was more confused. With good reason, too. How on earth would Kakashi have gotten the Sharingan? That was an Uchiha thing. Zabuza suddenly skipped backwards, standing on the surface of the water. Now shall we put it to the test? Ribbons of chakra spun around him for a moment, kicking up spray from the water on which he stood. Kirigakure no jutsu, he whispered, and the mist closed in. Naruto glanced around in near panic. He could not see. He could not see anything. Every sound seemed magnified, every shadow ominous, but he could not see. He could barely see Sasuke standing next to him. Then that power. He had felt killing intent before, but this was more than he had ever imagined. Kakashi ahead of them was an indistinct shadow, impossible to see clearly. Sasuke stood to the side, gripping the handle of a kunai as if it was the rope holding him up above a bottomless pit. There was a pressure on Naruto's mind, almost as if someone was crushing his head, forcing him to admit that he was tiny, worthless, helpless. That his life was not his own then, another pressure, a familiar one this time. You see what power is? You can have power. And there was force, an outward force, and red filled his vision, and then Kakashi did something almost explosive, and the mist around them blew away as if in a storm of wind. Naruto forced the red down, as the external pressure of Zabuza's killing intent also subsided. The fox grumbled within him but did not protest. Kakashi spoke without turning around. "Don't worry. No harm will come to you." He did not address the remarks. They might just as well have been to Tazuna or the genin, but both took it as reassurance. There was a slight relaxation in the air at the dissipation of the enemy's mist. Then there was a laugh, a long, sincerely amused laugh, seeming to come from all directions. "You say you can prevent it?" And Zabuza appeared, suddenly, straight in the middle of the formation that the genin had established, his huge sword out and ready to swing, and the swing would have cut through all four of them before they could react. Then Kakashi was there, ducking under the sword's hilt, driving a kunai straight into Zabuza's stomach, as the genin leapt backwards, and Tazuna fell over on his butt. And still Zabuza laughed. Naruto looked at him, incredulous. Kakashi had won, surely. Zabuza was standing there with a kunai lodged in his stomach below the rib cage, Kakashi in front of him, water was dripping from the wound. Wait, water? As that thought crossed his mind, Zabuza fell apart, dissolved into water, and another one appeared behind Kakashi. "Sensei!" he shouted, knowing it was too late, hearing Sakura say the same thing, as the new Zabuza swung his gigantic sword around in a wide arc, catching Kakashi in the middle of it, slicing him straight in half. Blood flew everywhere. No, that was water again. "Wait, what?" Another Kakashi appeared, this time standing behind and to the side of the other Zabuza, holding a kunai to his throat. "It's over," he said, almost impassive. Naruto noticed with some frustration that it was almost as impossible to read Kakashi's expressions with both eyes showing as without. He still had that darn mask. Zabuza was still laughing, which made Naruto nervous, but as far as he could tell Zabuza was beaten. Kakashi was standing there, and any motion Zabuza made would not be finished before Kakashi opened up his throat and probably took off his head. "So why?" Zabuza spoke through his laughs. "Indeed, well, are you called Sharingan no Kakashi? You copied my water clone without me noticing in the mist. I must congratulate you. But I'm afraid," he turned his head with a sudden predatory gleam in his eye, "that you are a little overconfident." He spun suddenly, bringing up his sword. Just as predicted, Kakashi violently jerked the kunai through his neck, his head flying off, his body dissolving into water. Again. Then another Zabuza appeared, again behind Kakashi, and swung his sword. Naruto's warning died on his lips as Kakashi dropped out of the way with astounding speed. The dodge left him vulnerable. Zabuza's sword swung around, stabbed into the ground, and then Zabuza, pivoting on its hilt, spun himself around and kicked Kakashi hard. He flew off, landing in the middle of the river. Zabuza dashed after him, the edge of the water apparently meaning nothing to him. He ran on the water as easily as he ran on land, coming up alongside Kakashi just as he broke the surface of the water. He made a few hand seals, and suddenly the water flowed up out of the river, around Kakashi, forming a perfect sphere with their sensei trapped in the middle of it. There was a few moments' apparent conversation between the two, and then Zabuza raised a hand, keeping, Naruto noticed, the other embedded in the sphere of water. Miza Bunshin no Jutsu. A copy of Zabuza rose out of the water near the shore, stepping onto dry land with an arrogant tread. His copied sword was slung across his back. Kakashi shouted at them. "Run! You have to run! You can't beat him, but he has to stay here to keep me trapped. Run!" Naruto moved forward, almost on instinct. He saw Sasuke doing the same beside. The two glanced at each other, then back at the water clone, grinning. "We can't run," said Sasuke conversationally. "If we go, this guy can probably kill Kakashi-sensei somehow inside that thing, and then he'll come after us and kill us. Only way we can win is to get Kakashi out." The clone, close enough to hear their conversation, laughed. "A masterful analysis. A pity you have no chance." Naruto rubbed his nose thoughtfully. "You know, even when he did the water clone jutsu, the real guy back there didn't move his hand from out of that thing Kakashi's in." Sasuke nodded. "Well, gotta get past this guy first." He indicated the clone. Naruto nodded. "I'll get right on that. Fighting a Jonin formation sound good?" Sasuke snorted. "Wonderfully creative name you've got there. Sounds good." Naruto grinned widely and crossed his fingers. Taju Hokage Bunshin no Jutsu. The clearing filled with clones. Naruto glanced to one side to see that Sasuke had, according to plan, hinged into a copy of Naruto as well. The clones spread out, moving to the edges of the river, making a large semicircle around the water clone of Zabuza. Then they all threw kunai at once. Zabuza's eyes had widened when Naruto made his clones, but he did not move. The kunai, prepared as usual with exploding tags around the handles, made him do so. He jumped straight back onto the water. The majority of the exploding kunai congregated where he had been, and exploded. A few wild throws were deflected by the clone's sword. Then the clones attacked again. This time, Zabuza's clone was forced to leap straight up. As the kunai exploded beneath him, the clones threw at him again, in the same technique that had killed Mizuki and forced Kakashi to resort to a quick substitution. The clone did not bother. He whipped his sword around and stood on it in midair. All the kunai, aimed from below as they were, bounced off, but most of them exploded around that time. The water clone was thrown up in the air several more feet by the explosion, shielded by the giant's sword. He fell to the surface of the river and sank for a moment before rising up and standing on the surface. The sword was nowhere to be seen. His face was grim. "Enough," said he. He produced 2 kunai seemingly from nowhere and charged at the mob of clones. It was Kakashi all over again. None of the clones had the slightest chance against even a clone of Zabuza. Any of them that entered his reach died, and none landed a single blow upon him. The mob, which had been spread out in a semicircle surrounding the clone, gathered around him, hoping to overwhelm him with force of numbers, but they were unsuccessful. Even the huge number of clones Naruto had summoned began to thin out, throwing themselves against the juggernaut. One behind him was making seals. Zabuza did not notice. He was supremely aware of any clone that entered his hand-to-hand range, but those beyond did not concern him. They would only die in their turn. Thus, he was startled, if only momentarily inconvenienced, when all the clones around him lunged at once and grabbed his limbs, and more startled at the voice from behind him. "Katon, Gakkaku no Jutsu!" A fireball engulfed all the clones, the 12 or so of Naruto holding on as well as the one of Zabuza that was the target. Naruto's clones disappeared immediately, leaving puffs of smoke behind. Zabuza's held out for almost a full 2 seconds in the fire before dissolving into another puddle of water. Sasuke's henge ended as he bent over, panting. Some 5 of Naruto, all that were left of the original mob of clones, gathered round him. The original Zabuza, standing still on the surface of the river by Kakashi's prison, raised his eyebrows. "Impressive, brats." He raised his free hand again. "Mizubunshin no Jutsu." Another clone climbed out of the river, standing near the edge. Naruto glanced at Sasuke, releasing his remaining clones. "That got us absolutely nowhere, didn't it?" "So it seems." Sasuke had recovered a little, and was standing straight. Naruto did not seem to have expended any energy at all. Zabuza's new clone laughed. "An impressive showing. You caught me by surprise. It won't do you any good, though. You can't keep up attacks of that magnitude for as long as I can keep up making water clones." Naruto glanced sideways at Sasuke. "Let's find out." He crossed his fingers again, making another, though smaller, mob of clones. They all charged at Zabuza's water clone nearby. Sasuke was the only one to notice the big shuriken one of them had tossed him as it attacked. He looked it over for a moment, then raised an eyebrow. The clones had all attacked Zabuza at once. As was more or less predictable, without one throwing heavy jutsus around, they did nothing at all. A single swipe of the big sword dispelled most of them and sent the remainder skidding away, dispersing with muted pops as they went. Sasuke put the dots together quickly. By this time he had already gotten another shuriken from his pack. He leapt into the air, one of the 2 unfolded in his hand, the other behind him. "Take this, then." A shuriken whirled and flew towards Zabuza, straight past the clone, targeting the real one still holding Kakashi prisoner. By the time Sasuke landed, his hands were empty. Zabuza watched the incoming shuriken without any particular consternation. It was a formidable weapon, spinning at a high rate of speed, closing on him quickly, so fast that his eyes could not track its rotation. But if he moved just so, and grabbed it here, the shuriken stopped dead, abruptly, and Zabuza swung it out to one side to cancel its forward momentum. He grinned at the brats. Good try, but he stopped. Another shuriken had been behind the first. This one was close, too close to grab, and his hand was out of place. It moved towards him as if in slow motion, and with a sudden, convulsive effort he leapt, not a leap as any self-respecting ninja would practice, but a desperate yanking of his lower body out of the way. His hand remained in the water prison, maintaining it, as he folded the rest of him up into a tiny space below his head. The shuriken passed straight underneath him, harmless, and he returned to position with a sigh of relief. "An even better try. I might even acknowledge you as worth fighting. You still have no." He cut himself off, again, at the sound of a henge behind him. He looked around frantically to see that the shuriken had, in fact, been a loud, annoying, blonde brat with a kunai in his hand, who threw it hard at his shoulder with a cry of "Take this." Zabuza was faced with a choice. He could remove his hand from the water prison and dodge the kunai, which would leave him unharmed but fighting a pissed-off Sharingan no Kakashi. Or he could take the shot, which was quite well aimed, Zabuza admitted with grudging respect, at the big, important muscles in his shoulder. The kunai would cripple his arm, and there was no way he would be able to maintain the water prison through that. That option would leave him quite emphatically harmed, and also fighting a pissed-off Sharingan no Kakashi. With one arm. Zabuza chose the former. Sasuke glanced between his teacher and the downed form of Zabuza at the base of the tree in front of him. The power of the Sharingan was awe-inspiring. Kakashi had the full three-tomo form, Sasuke had noticed, and his mastery of it, at least, that either had ever shown Sasuke, was at least as great as his father's had been. Of course, it was nothing on Itachi's. That thought would have thrown him into depression, again, if there had not been important things happening to keep him distracted. Kakashi was threatening Zabuza with death. Routine enough, Sasuke supposed, and he was pissed off enough at Zabuza not to particularly care. He had taken a few hits from that clone when hinged into Naruto, and they had hurt. Zabuza was looking up, frightened. Kakashi was about to put his own sword through his neck. Zabuza was falling over, apparently dead, of three sabans suddenly protruding from his throat. What? Kakashi looked up, alert again, to see a shinobi in an odd, porcelain mask standing on a tree branch. Sasuke looked at him? Her? Impossible to tell, as closely as he could, but could not discern anything that was not obvious. I need my Sharingan. The ninja was jumping down to the ground, approaching Zabuza's body. The ninja was saying something about being from Kirigakure and hunting down Zabuza as a traitor. The ninja was picking up Zabuza's body over his? Her? Shoulder. They're strong. I could probably do that, but it'd be kind of hard. The ninja was walking some distance away. The ninja disappeared, probably with a shunshin. Kakashi looked around, seemingly caught off balance. Sasuke walked over to him. The dobe had crawled out of the river where he had landed from his henge stunt and walked over as well. Both Kakashi and the dobe were soaking wet, but that was trivial. Kakashi looked at Sasuke. Listen. I've overused this Sharingan. I'm going to collapse from chakra exhaustion pretty soon now. Get Tazuna home. Get me there. I'll just need to rest. You're in charge until I wake up. The dobe did not comment. Sasuke would have expected him to complain bitterly about that, but apparently he was too high on his earlier triumph to do so. Well, let him be. It had been impressive. Kakashi reached up and pulled his hitai down over his Sharingan, concealing it again. Then his visible eye rolled up in his head and he collapsed. Naruto woke to an unfamiliar ceiling, and it took him a moment to remember where he was. Then it clicked, and he rolled out of the futon that nice lady had put down for him the previous night. Sasuke's mat beside him was already empty, and a glance out the window in the hallway had the sun well above the horizon. Drat. I thought I was on a good rhythm. Note: sleeping habits do not always withstand major battles. He moved in a sudden rush downstairs. Sasuke was sitting at the big table in the dining room, in the midst of eating breakfast. He looked up and gave Naruto his trademark slightly smug fraction of a grin. Naruto stuck his tongue out at the other genin and looked into the kitchen, where Tazuna's daughter, what had her name been, worked at a stove. She looked around at the sound of his steps and smiled over her shoulder. Oh, Naruto-kun. There's some breakfast for you right there. She indicated with her head a counter to the side of the door, with a loaded plate. Naruto grinned, taking the plate. Thanks, he stopped stumped. The woman laughed. My name is Tsunami, Naruto-kun. Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly, balancing the plate on one hand. Sorry, Tsunami-san. She waved a hand at him. No trouble at all. Enjoy the food. He needed no further invitation, but walked over to the table and sat across from Sasuke. Sasuke had finished his food by now, and cleared it off into a pile near the sink in the kitchen. By the time he had walked back to the table, Naruto was halfway through his own plateful. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. You think you're eating fast enough, dobe? Naruto rolled his eyes, that being the only retaliatory expression available to him with his hands and mouth wholly occupied. In only a few moments more, he had finished the whole plate. I like to call it expeditious. Naruto smugly noted Sasuke's momentary surprise. He usually didn't use the sorts of words one came across in the more advanced sealing scrolls, but they came in handy occasionally. Naruto had just finished clearing his own dishes when there was a sudden, startling thump and crash from upstairs. The two boys glanced at each other and went quickly to the stairs, seeking out the room in which they had slept. Kakashi was lying on the single elevated bed in the room. His eye was open, surprising both genin, and one hand reached out to the side. On the floor, there was the ceremonial stone statue that had yesterday, and, judging by available evidence, until perhaps 30 seconds ago, sat on the table by the bed. It was evidently the source of the noise. Sakura ran quickly into the room only moments behind the two other genin. Naruto noted her silence. He had not heard her until only moments before the door opened. When did she get so quiet? That had certainly not been an aspect of her personality that he had noted before. If anything, she was more likely to yell. Kakashi turned his head towards the three genin. Hello, there, my shiny genin, he said, his voice almost normal but with a definite note of strain. Naruto crossed his arms. What was with knocking stuff around, sensei? Kakashi moved his shoulders minutely, A motion that might be interpreted as a shrug if you were looking for it. I couldn't have shouted loud enough to get your attention. Naruto's face shifted instantly from mildly belligerent to chagrined. Oh, sorry, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's voice was near its normal volume, but the strain in it led Naruto easily to believe him. Listen, said Kakashi. Zabuza is not dead. There was an immediate clamor. All three of the genin had seen Zabuza slump down, hit by the mist hunter Nin's needles. Kakashi had even checked his pulse before the hunter had removed the body. None of them had doubted that he was dead. Kakashi waved his free hand in a tiny motion. It took a moment for the genin to recognize the request for silence, but when they did they quieted immediately. The hunter Nin hit him with saban. Precise weapons. Rarely kill. Can be used for difficult medical purposes if hit pressure points. Can put a person in a death state that they can revive from. He took a breath, his voice becoming more labored. Took his body away. Hunter Nin, don't do that. Take a part on the spot. Hunter Nin probably an ally of Zabuza. The genin had become more and more sober through this declaration. Sasuke spoke first. So what do we do then? Kakashi nodded, a tiny motion. Fulfill mission. Protect Tazuna. Afternoon I will be able to walk. Then train. Until then you watch. He locked his eye on those of each of his students in turn, receiving each nod. Then, his message delivered, he closed his visible eye and seemingly slept. There was a moment of silence, then, as if by accord, the genin quietly left the room. It wasn't until they reached the bottom floor that Naruto let out a breath. Wow. That's serious. Sasuke nodded, apparently now without any urge to mock the hyper-blonde. Sakura was almost white, and her hands were fidgeting around by her sides. How can that happen? How did he get chakra exhaustion that bad? Normally you should be knocked out before that happens, to be so weak a day later. Sasuke glanced at her. You saw his eye? Sakura nodded mutely. The Sharingan drains chakra quite strongly. In an Uchiha, the eye will shut itself off when chakra gets low. An implanted one takes even more chakra, and you can't turn it off. It's not right for his body. Naruto nodded, still quieter than usual. I've only read the stuff in the archive, and they just say that an implanted Sharingan is really dangerous. I'd kinda figured that that was something the Uchiha put about to make it less of a target for people killing them, but I guess he shrugged. Guess not. He made a visible effort, and shrugged off the sober atmosphere. So, what do we do now? Sasuke looked at him sidelong, but played along. If Zabuza isn't dead, then he might attack here. If he does, we had better know the area. Maybe keep watches. Hey Dobe, can you put out clones on watch? Naruto nodded. He raised his hands in the cross-hand seal, but then seemed to think better of it. And maybe I'd better wait until we're outside. Sasuke looked at him sardonically. That would certainly be less disruptive to Tsunami-san than having a stampede of you rushing out the door. Naruto scratched his head and grinned sheepishly. He had no desire to inconvenience Tsunami, who seemed kind enough and had taken 4 unexpected houseguests late at night with equanimity and courtesy. Instead, he rushed out the door. Sasuke and Sakura followed, just in time to see a huge mass of smoke, then several hundred clones. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. That was as many as he'd ever seen the Dobe do at once. The clones dispersed quickly, each one running off through the trees as fast as it could. Naruto was left standing in the center of the slightly trampled area left by the mob, grinning. Sasuke walked up to him. How many sentries do you think we need? Naruto turned to him. Not sentries. I'm just sending them all out at once so that they get a feel for what this place looks like, so I know it later. That way the sentries later can do stuff better. He was quite evidently energetic from his night's sleep and good meal, and looking for somewhere to burn it off. Sasuke nodded fractionally. Yeah, I guess. Naruto was still looking around, almost glowing with pent-up exuberance. Where did this come from all of a sudden? So what do we do until this afternoon? He was clearly restraining himself from tacking on Huh? To the end of the question, Sasuke was suddenly and forcefully reminded of an overeager puppy. He rolled his eyes. Sakura spoke when he did not. Kakashi-sensei said we'd be training? I suppose that we could do that, but we shouldn't wear ourselves out. This with a glance at Naruto, focused specifically on the 50-foot circle of trampled-down grass around him. Naruto was oblivious. Yeah, we should train. Hey team, fight me! The technical slur was spoken with no rancor at all. It seemed an almost pro forma attempt to annoy Sasuke. Sasuke ignored it. If you really want to, Dobe. He squared off into a stance. Naruto jumped at him, not even summoning any clones. It was laughable, but for some reason, it was formidable. He was faster than he had been, and stronger. Sasuke barely managed to block the first 3 blows, and what was he doing? Those weren't punches, those were swipes. It was as if he thought he had claws, or something. Sasuke blocked 2 of 3 blows in a combination by Naruto, taking the third. It threw him back almost 10 feet, and Naruto charged him again. This time, more prepared, Sasuke slid around the charge and threw Naruto in return, his momentum sending him through the air to land some 20 feet away. He landed on all fours and ran at Sasuke again, grinning. This time Sasuke crossed his arms and locked them, taking Naruto's first charge on the wall thereby formed. He was pushed backwards, skidding on his own feet, but managed to stop the charge. Naruto laughed in delight and started swiping at him again, and the blows, unconventional as they were, somehow seemed dangerous. Sasuke found himself dodging rather than blocking, on some instinct afraid of the strikes. Which was ridiculous. He scowled, annoyed at himself, and stopped one of the swipes. The power behind it was impressive, but he stopped it, and in the opening he created he stepped closer to Naruto and hit him hard just below the ribs. The blow was strong, Sasuke was annoyed, and he was not following his usual instincts to avoid hurting an ally. It should have knocked Naruto back, knocked the wind out of him, at least. It did not. Naruto took the hit and smiled, and then hit Sasuke with another of those absurd swipes, and it knocked him down. It knocked him down. A glorified slap, delivered from a position of no leverage, and he had knocked Sasuke down. Granted, it had caught him off guard, but Sasuke, lying on his side, rolled over and brought up his arms and legs just in time to catch Naruto, who had jumped on him. He flexed his body, pushing with the feet buried in the hyperdobe's midsection, and threw him backwards, then with an arcing wave of his legs and torso jumped to his feet. He had always been rather proud of being able to do that. It took some flexibility. It did not impress Naruto. The blonde had not been fazed by the many blows he had taken. He charged in again, and Sasuke was fully engaged with blocking or dodging his weirdly powerful strikes. "When the hell," Sasuke said between blows, "did you get so strong?" Naruto frowned, without, of course, lessening the ferocity of his assault. "You know, I really don't know." He spoke straight through the exertions that Sasuke had had to pause around, which for some reason irritated him indescribably. He's controlling the fight. He's on the offensive. That's not what should happen. Sasuke braced himself against the next few blows without bothering to dodge or block, using his arms instead to hit Naruto with 3 strikes, first to the torso, then to the face. They did nothing, apparently. Sasuke dropped into a crouch and spun around with one leg extended, hoping to knock Naruto down. Naruto jumped over the sweep and tackled Sasuke from behind, knocking him forwards and the wind out of him. By the time he regained thought processes, the dobe had wrapped his arms around Sasuke's neck, holding him in one of the Academy's standard chokes, though he didn't apply pressure. Sasuke couldn't see him, but he swore he perfectly visualized what Naruto's face would look like, a huge, playful grin. "Gotcha," said he, with glee. Sasuke scowled at the ground, which was all he could see. "Okay, you win, let me up." Naruto let go and stood up. Sasuke rolled over and scrambled to his feet, his composure ruffled. "When the hell did you get so strong?" Sasuke was mystified, frustrated, and slightly annoyed. Naruto shrugged. "I dunno. I just felt really energetic all of a sudden." Sasuke rolled his eyes at Naruto's typical lack of introspection, or eloquence, or basic intelligence. "Well, maybe I'm bitter." "And where did those swipes come from?" Naruto frowned. "What are you talking about?" Sasuke rolled his eyes again. "The swipes, Naruto. You weren't punching me, you were doing something like this." He demonstrated Naruto's motion as best he could, a forehand slap with his fingers bent as if in claws. "Like you thought you had some sort of claws on or something, maybe like those things that the demon brothers were wearing?" Naruto did not hear Sasuke's speculation into idiosyncratic weapons. He had stopped listening at one word. "Claws?" he demanded, suddenly intense. "It looked like I was trying to fight with claws." Sasuke looked at him, taken aback. "Yeah, a little. And you got freaky strong. Like you knocked me down by doing this." He demonstrated the swiping motion again. Naruto looked shaken. I'll be, right back. I need to have a talk with, I need to go." He dashed off into the woods. Sasuke stared after him, mystified. "What?" Naruto stopped at the base of a tree, almost a mile away. He sat down, breathing hard, not with the exertion of the run, for he still felt an odd energy, and an urge to move, but in sudden apprehension. "Claws. Like I was trying to fight with claws. Fox claws?" He evened his breathing, closed his eyes, and shouted in his mind. The last time he had tried this, he had exhausted his chakra first so that a bit of the fox's flowed through him, but the fox had proven able to speak to him without that exhaustion. Hopefully it would work now. "Hey, fox, explain this. What are you doing to my fighting?" He did not fall, did not sleep, but a familiar voice filled his mind. "You are displeased, whelp?" "Yeah, I'm displeased. What are you doing?" "You dislike strength?" You dislike speed? You dislike being able to overcome your rival? He said I was fighting like I thought I had claws. I don't do that. So you're doing something. What are you doing? I am merely giving you strength. That you think you are fighting as me comes as no surprise. My power, my mind flows with it. I don't like it. What if, when I'm like that, I go too far and hurt someone? If it's you doing it, I think you'd do that happily. There was a dark laugh. You mistake me, whelp. I do not control your actions. A bit of my mind flows into you. You would find it more useful if you drew on more of my power, but you would not, would you? Not against that human. In any case, you still have control. This damned seal ensures that the fox drifted into angry muttering. Naruto was still uncertain. Why are you doing it now? The fox snorted inside his mind, an odd sound, incongruous with its aura of menace. Now that you can draw upon my power, I wish you to. Imagine sitting without moving a muscle for 12 years.